Chapter 1143 Secret of the Nine Snake Tribe. Chapter 1143 Secret of the Nine Snake Tribe. Empress Luan Xing naturally knew that Ling Han had a spatial god tool. If this hadn't been the case, she would have pushed him over and done him already. Her beautiful face involuntarily flushed red when she thought of this. She couldn't unleash all of her power in this current body, and thus she couldn't maintain the air of primal chaos around her face. Ling Han could clearly see her expression. This left him astonished. This empress actually has a coy side to her. Has the sun risen from the west? Empress Luan Xing became a little angry, and said, "What are staring at me for?" Ling Han chuckled in reply. It was truly impossible for him to fear this empress anymore. Come. He swept the empress up in his divine sense and brought her into the Black Tower. How is this possible? Empress Luan Xing cried in surprise. The space inside this spatial god tool was far too vast. There are heaps of impossible things waiting for you, Ling Han said smugly. Being able to astonish this empress so much made him feel extremely accomplished. Empress Luan Xing felt more and more astonished as she walked through the land. This was because there were all kinds of godly medicine growing here. They were all thriving and brimming with vitality, and their ages were also extremely high. She found this to be incredible. Ling Han had clearly only just arrived after opening the sky, so how could he have planted so many godly medicines? He didn't have enough time. Come. Ling Han grabbed the Empress' slender hand as he ran forward. Empress Luan Xing instantly felt annoyed. Has he become addicted to grabbing my hand? She tugged her arm and tried to break free from his grip, yet she realized that her strength was surprisingly no match for Ling Han's. She couldn't help but feel shocked. Her cultivation level was clearly unchanged, so why couldn't she break free from a mere mountain river tier cultivator? How was this possible? She was so stunned that she could barely speak. Welcome to my world. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, Here, I'm the one and only king. Humph. Small Tower appeared and humphed in displeasure. Ling Han grimaced. He sighed, and said, Of course, there's also the tool spirit of this god tool. It never treats meat's owner seriously. Well, I'm so sorry about that, Small Tower said sarcastically. Empress Luan Xing was transfixed with astonishment. What kind of god tool is this? How is it so impressive? It can even elevate Ling Han's power to a level far above mine. Also, why is this tool spirit so human? It doesn't seem like a tool spirit at all. Shouldn't they be emotionless and rigidly following some sort of regulation? They quickly arrived before the reincarnation tree. Notionless Saint was the first person to notice them. A puzzled expression appeared on his face as he saw Empress Luan Xing, and he said, You remind me of the girl from before. However, you're clearly a different person. Strange. Kan Yi and the three others all greeted him respectfully, and said, Young Master Han. Ling Han waved his hand, and said, There's nothing for you guys to worry about. Keep cultivating and strive to reach the immortal level as soon as possible. Understood. The four people returned to their spots under the reincarnation tree and continued to cultivate. Meanwhile, Empress Luan Xing stared at the reincarnation tree, and it was as if she recognized this divine tree. After a while, she shouted in surprise, This is the reincarnation tree. Ling Han nodded, and said, You're truly knowledgeable. You even managed to recognize the reincarnation tree. Empress Luan Xing pondered for a moment before saying, You bought a seed of a reincarnation tree once. Could this be it? Spot on. Ling Han raised his thumb as he praised the empress. No praise would be too much praise for this kind of stunning beauty. Empress Luan Xing naturally wouldn't pay too much attention to his deliberate praises. Instead, she mulled over how this was possible, and said, It's only been a little over 2 years since you arrived in the immortal realm. Regardless of what you did, it would have been impossible for you to obtain so much godly medicine, to say nothing of this reincarnation tree. That being the case, there's only one possibility left. Her eyes lit up, and she said, You're able to accelerate the growth of godly medicine. Hee. Ling Han chuckled, and said, How is it? Do you want to cultivate here? This is the reincarnation tree, so 1 day's worth of cultivation is equivalent to 1 year's worth. Empress Luan Xing was extremely tempted by this offer. Accumulating origin power was an easy task to an elite like her. She could complete this process in a few thousand years. However, comprehending the Great Tao was different. This step could take millions or even tens of millions of years. The fact that this galaxy only had one eternal river tier elite was proof of just how difficult this step was. Empress Luan Xing stared at Ling Han and asked, "What conditions are there?" "This favor." No, this had already transcended the level of a mere favor. If she exposed the secret of Ling Han owning a reincarnation tree, he would definitely be hunted by all of the saints in the world. "You don't want me to marry down, do you?" Ling Han's expression became serious, and he said, "I already said just then. I'll tell you my biggest secret, and in exchange, you also need to tell me your secret." Empress Luan Xing humphed upon hearing this. "Do you think this is child's play? You'll tell me one secret and then I'll tell you one?" However, she had to admit that Ling Han trusted her a great deal. After all, he had even revealed the secret of his reincarnation tree to her. She couldn't help but feel slightly touched. Yes, only slightly, she stressed to herself. "What do you want to know?" the Empress asked haughtily. "What's your relationship with this body?" Ling Han asked. This was clearly Hu Feiyun's body, yet she had suddenly become Empress Luan Xing. Her power had risen along with this transformation, though it still hadn't reached the same height as Empress Luan Xing's original body. Even so, it had still reached the heavenly body tier. "Haha, I know." Notionless Saint suddenly shouted. He wasn't content with being left aside. "Senior knows," Ling Han said in surprise. "Of course," Notionless Saint replied smugly. "It's simple, she's from the 9-snake tribe." Ling Han was completely baffled. How does her tribe have anything to do with this? Empress Luan Xing decided to spill the beans upon hearing this. Otherwise, Notionless Saint would reveal her secret anyway. The 9-snake tribe has a natural talent. That is, we're able to maintain 9 separate clones. Ling Han was dazed for a moment. Then, he suddenly came to his senses, and said, "This is one of your clones." "Hang on a second. 9 kings. The 9 kings are your 9 separate clones." "Correct," Empress Luan Xing said with a nod. Ling Han finally understood why Notionless Saint had said that Empress Luan Xing's power should have reached 9 stars, yet the power that she had displayed was far below this level. This was because the Empress had distributed her power among her 9 separate clones. No wonder the 9 kings held such lofty positions and received the unconditional support of the Empress. The reason for this was simple: the 9 kings were Empress Luan Xing. Empress Luan Xing saw that Ling Han was still a little puzzled, so she continued, "I cultivated the 9 deaths heaven art and formed 9 separate bodies. When all of my clones reach the peak stage of the heavenly body tier and return to my primary body, I'll be able to reach the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier." Ling Han's eyes widened in surprise, and he said, "In reality, you're already able to attempt breaking through to the eternal river tier. However, you've held back this entire time just because you wanted to cultivate the heavenly body tier to perfection. What do you think?" Empress Luan Xing replied haughtily. Ling Han remained silent. However, he couldn't help but admire her in his mind. As expected of the talented and bold Empress, she's gone to such great lengths and even formed 9 clones just to cultivate to a state of perfection. What if something untoward happens to one of your clones? Then I'll suffer an eternal Tao wound and lose any chance of becoming the strongest. Chapter 1144 Intimate Talk with the Empress. Chapter 1144 Intimate Talk with the Empress. "So, you have to form 9 clones every time you're trying to reach the pinnacle level?" Ling Han asked. "Correct." Empress Luan Xing nodded with a serious expression, and said, "The higher my cultivation level, the longer it takes for my 9 clones to reach the peak stage. This is also a test. If I insist on pursuing the pinnacle level after reaching the eternal river tier, I mightn't have enough time to reach the Genesis tier." However, she paused for a moment before continuing, "Everything's changed now that there's the reincarnation tree." Things had indeed changed. The higher one's cultivation level, the longer it would take to comprehend the Great Tao. However, The reincarnation tree could assist one in comprehending the great Tao, with 1 day's worth of comprehension under the reincarnation tree equivalent to 1 year's worth in the outside world. Even cultivating 90 clones would be no problem, much less a mere 9 clones. Ling Han glanced at the Empress. What did she mean? She still hadn't become a member of the Ling clan yet, but she was already planning to take advantage of the Ling clan's resources. Ahem. He coughed softly, and said, Although I shared my secret with you, I never said that I was going to share the reincarnation tree as well. All lands under the heaven belong to the imperial authority, Empress Luan Xing said haughtily. You're a citizen of my empire, and I've already shown great generosity by allowing you to maintain possession of the reincarnation tree, yet you still want to keep all the benefits for yourself? Fuck. As expected of a ruler. So slippery. Ling Han shook his head, and said, This is my most valuable treasure, so how can I share it with outsiders? It's not impossible for you to cultivate here, but look, those 4 are my followers, and this senior is. Forget about it, he's not even a person. In any case, you're not one of us, so you can't cultivate here. Notionless Saint couldn't help but feel vexed. If he wasn't a person, then what was he? There was no need to insult him like that, was there? At the very least, he had been a saint once, okay? Sigh, I'm under someone else's roof, so I can only endure this. How could Empress Luan Xing not understand Ling Han's words? One of us. What did one of us mean? She humphed in reply. This brat was indeed having dirty thoughts about her. However, she couldn't become angry no matter what. If Ling Han had genuinely been a shameless lowlife, he would have pushed her over and done her a long time ago. Why would he wait until now? What a weird person. Then what do you want? She squinted her eyes, a dangerous aura radiating from her body. Hehe, you'd better think your actions through carefully, Ling Han said with a chuckle. This is my territory, so whatever I say goes. Don't act too mighty, or you'll have to be careful of being punished by me. He had wanted to smack this Empress's bottom since long ago. Although this wasn't the Empress' primary body, that didn't matter too much. Her mind and spirit were in this body, so she would definitely feel whatever this body felt. Empress Luan Xing's overwhelming aura instantly weakened. If this were the outside world, she would be able to suppress Ling Han with a single hand. But here. Sorry, but this was indeed Ling Han's territory, where everything that he said went. Ling Han rubbed his hands together, and his expression was as if he eagerly wanted Empress Luan Xing to act stubbornly and retort. Empress Luan Xing rolled her eyes. Ling Han smiled, and said, Why did you suddenly appear just then? Wasn't it because you were jealous? Huh. Empress Luan Xing chuckled coldly, and said, Jealous? Do you think I have that much spare time? Then why did you interfere? Ling Han asked with a smile. He didn't mind wasting time with the Empress. Why do I have to tell you? Empress Luan Xing said with a cold chuckle. Ling Han grinned, and said, You asked for it. He lifted the Empress up and pressed her onto his knees. He then immediately started to act like a lowlife pervert without a word of warning. Pa. He started to smack the Empress bottom. He was most powerful being in the Black Tower apart from Small Tower. Ling Han had never considered himself to be a person of noble character, and the only thing that had stopped him from forcing himself onto the Empress was the principles that he stood by. However, they had already embraced, felt each other up, and kissed. In Ling Han's books, she was already his wife. They had already gone so far, so how could he allow the Empress to marry someone else? No way. Thus, smacking the Empress bottom didn't weigh him down with any mental burden. The Empress struggled and attempted to break free. This was far too embarrassing. Detestable, she spat through gritted teeth. However, her voice was dripping with a seductive and alluring edge. She was clearly in Hu Feiyun's body right now, so she wasn't a stunning beauty, even though she was still extremely beautiful. However, now that she possessed the Empress soul, her every move was enchanting and filled a womanly charm. Ling Han snickered, and said, So, are you going to tell me now? Do you want to die? The Empress asked in fury. She had never imagined that Ling Han, who had been so restrained during their 2 years together, would actually do something so audacious. He was actually smacking her bottom. She could feel bursts of numbness traveling over from her bottom. It didn't hurt, yet it felt as if some unknown emotion had been lit inside her, making her involuntarily press her legs together. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Have you learned your lesson yet? Smacking this clone's bottom already felt so amazing, so how incredible would it feel to smack her primary body's bottom?" His heart shuddered as he thought of this, and he almost howled aloud in excitement. "Why, you win!" The Empress could only submit to Ling Han. The situation left her with no other option. Ling Han still hadn't had enough yet, and he said, "Why didn't you resist for longer?" "I still haven't had enough yet." Sigh. Empress Luan Xing felt as if she were about to go crazy. She really wanted to bite him to death. She humphed, and said, "It's not impossible for you to marry me." They had hugged, embraced, and kissed, and she couldn't bring herself to kill this man, either. Thus, it seemed as if marrying down was her only option. As an empress, she was naturally domineering and resolute. She definitely wouldn't hesitate and wallow in indecisiveness. "What conditions do you have? List them out." Ling Han said confidently. "I'll marry you once you advance to the Genesis tier." Empress Luan Xing said. "Oi, oi, oi. That's way too insincere." Ling Han said in protest. "You're so talented, yet it still took you 1,000,000 years to reach the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. If I want to marry you, won't that take 2 or even 3,000,000 years? He feels so good about himself," Empress Luan Xing said in her mind. Ling Han had shown zero doubts about being able to reach the Genesis tier. His only worry was how long it would take for him to reach this level. However, was 2 or 3,000,000 years genuinely a long time? If he could reach the Genesis tier in 2 or 3,000,000 years, he would have definitely achieved a first at least. This was the case in Empress Luan Xing's mind. 2 or 3,000,000 years was an incredibly short amount of time. "I'm about to reach the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. As such, reaching the eternal river tier is only a matter of time. If your cultivation level is inferior to mine, what right do you have to marry me?" she said calmly. "Understood." Ling Han clapped his hands, and said, "Sit tight and wait for me. You're bound to become my wife." Empress Luan Xing humphed, and said, "That's a matter for the future. Right now, you're still my subordinate. If you dare to She wanted to warn Ling Han, yet he unexpectedly pressed her onto his knees and started to smack her bottom again. "Say, Empress, you've gotten one thing wrong. Wedding you is only a formality. Don't attempt to challenge your man's authority." Ling Han was delighted that he had another opportunity to smack the Empress' shapely bottom. Also, what's going to happen to the 9th king's soul? Chapter 1145 Ancient Divine Tribe. Chapter 1145 Ancient Divine Tribe. "Why do I have to explain to you?" Empress Luan Xing asked haughtily. "Pa." There was a crisp smacking sound. Ling Han waved his hand, and said, "It seems like you still don't understand the situation you're in." This smack sent a stinging sensation through her body. The mysterious feeling in her body boiled even more intensely, and it was as if she were about to explode. She didn't dare to keep going. If she was aroused and anything more happened, wouldn't she be frequently subjected to this kind of situation in the future? "When this body reaches the heavenly body tier, my willpower will slowly awake and fuse with her," the Empress said. "The secret techniques of the 9 snake tribe are all like this. If I'm at the mountain river tier, my 9 clones will awake at the mountain river tier. If I'm at the eternal river tier, my 9 clones will awake at the eternal river tier." Ling Han faltered for a moment before asking, "Which is to say that she doesn't know of your existence?" "No, she doesn't," Empress Luan Xing answered. Ling Han's expression darkened, and he said, "So, she'll disappear for good once your willpower completely awakens?" "The personalities of the 9 clones are all originally from my body," Empress Luan Xing said in comfort. "In other words, they all represent a part of me. Moreover, I can still split these 9 clones from my body when I reach the eternal river tier." Ling Han relaxed slightly upon hearing this explanation. He had a fairly good impression of the innocent and ditzy 9th king. However, another thought occurred to him, and this caused his expression to become strange. "What's wrong?" Empress Luan Xing asked. Ling Han hesitated for a moment before saying, "Won't I get 9 free wives if I marry you? Holy smokes! How can I pleasure all 10 of you together? Pervert!" Empress Luan Xing shouted in anger. She smacked Ling Han and sent him flying. Of course, Ling Han had deliberately allowed her to send him flying. This was the Black Tower, so Empress Luan Xing was definitely no match for him. However, he had already teased her for so long, so it was about time that he relented a bit. Otherwise, he would definitely feel the wrath of Empress Luan Xing once they exited the Black Tower. Thus, it was better to be smacked around here and let her diffuse her anger a little. He ran back and said, "Say, wife. Who's your wife?" Empress Luan Xing said in irritation. She had merely given him a chance. As of right now, Ling Han still didn't have the right to have her willingly agree to marriage. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Then what should I call you? Darling? Love?" Empress Luan Xing stared at him, dumbfounded. She had initially thought that Ling Han was a serious person. However, who would have thought that he was actually this flippant? She shook her head, thinking that she had perhaps made an incorrect decision. However, she didn't want to correct it. "Call me Empress," she said with an emphasis. Ling Han nodded and said, "Okay. I might call you Empress now, but I'll have you call me Lord Husband in the future." "That Empress. There's only the two of us right now, so is there any need for you to refer to me like that? You're not cute at all." Ling Han sighed before saying seriously, "What the hell are the ancient divine tribes? They seem to be really impressive." "I know about this," Notionless Saint said. He was starting to seek attention again. He was a mighty saint, yet he had actually been left to the side and ignored. Did those two not know just how valuable the time of a saint was? They had the rare opportunity to learn from him, yet they actually didn't take advantage of this chance at all. Empress Luan Xing glanced at that orb of light. With this seemingly all-knowing saint present, there were some things that she couldn't keep secret. That being the case, she might as well take initiative and spill the beans. The ancient divine tribes are a collection of powerful yet lowly populated tribes. They appeared during ancient times, and all members of these tribes possess powerful abilities. "Brat, you might also be from an ancient divine tribe," Notionless Saint chimed. Ling Han's physique was incredibly powerful, and he felt that this could only be possible if Ling Han was from an ancient divine tribe. Empress Luan Xing nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Ling Han shook his head in disagreement. He had come from an ordinary family, so how could he be a member of some ancient divine tribe? The only reason for his physique and divine sense being so powerful was because he practiced the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Anyhow, Ling Han hadn't seen any members of the other ancient divine tribes. However, just looking at Empress Luan Xing proved just how incredible their abilities were. Members of the 9 snake tribe could maintain 9 clones, which was equivalent to having 9 extra lives. This was astonishing, almost unfathomable. "Time's almost up. I have to leave now," Empress Luan Xing suddenly said. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, "I'll send you out." Empress Luan Xing could know about Hu Feiyun's affairs, but this was a one-sided ability. When Empress Luan Xing possessed Hu Feiyun's body, Hu Feiyun would have no clue about what was happening. This was similar to what had happened in the Heavenly Sea mystery realm. It was clearly Empress Luan Xing who had killed that demonic beast, yet Hu Feiyun thought that it was Ling Han who had killed it. Empress Luan Xing nodded, and the two of them exited the Black Tower together. "Am I empty air?" Notionless Saint murmured gloomily. Why did they both ignore him? "Senior, I have a question." "Me too." Can Yi and the others walked over, and this instantly reignited Notionless Saint's self-confidence. He was in glowing spirits as he helped them. People needed to prove their own existence, they had to feel needed. This saint had passed away far too long ago, and thus his mental state was a far cry from what it had once been. He was already giddy with delight after being praised by a few shattering void tear cultivators. Empress Luan Xing shuddered after exiting the Black Tower. She shut her eyes before immediately opening them again. This only took an instant, yet her disposition had already changed immensely. Her air of haughtiness disappeared, and she became an innocent and ditzy woman. "Huh? Why am I here? Hu Feiyun asked with a puzzled expression. She bit her finger and cocked her head, appearing as confused as could be. "Wait for me here," Ling Han said. Upon seeing her nod, he went to look for Shui Yenyu. After finding her, he brought her back over here. Shui Yenyu couldn't help but feel some slight fear and respect toward Hu Feiyun. Why was her aura so terrifying? She asked Ling Han quietly. "I'll tell you later." Ling Han shook his head, then smiled at Hu Feiyun, and said, "Ninth King, I'll take you to a fun place." Okay. Hu Feiyun clapped her hands in excitement. With her ditzy personality, she would even count money for the person who sold her. Ling Han enveloped the two women with his divine sense and took them to the reincarnation tree in the Black Tower. "This is the reincarnation tree," Ling Han said to Hu Feiyun. "From now on, come here every night to cultivate. That way, your cultivation will improve rapidly." "I have to cultivate again." A bitter expression appeared on Hu Feiyun's face, and she said, "I hate cultivating. It's so toilsome and boring." Ling Han's mind wandered to the fact that the Ninth King was a personality that had been split from Empress Luanxing. This woman was ditzy, and this was a personality that Empress Luanxing didn't currently possess. She had split it from her main body, after all. This was fairly interesting. What transformations would Empress Luanxing's personality undergo when she eventually fused with her 9 clones? "Don't complain, okay?" Ling Han said as he patted Hu Feiyun's head. "Make sure to cultivate properly." Hu Feiyun pouted upon hearing this. However, she didn't object to Ling Han patting her head. Meanwhile, Shui Yenyu's eyes almost popped out in shock. That was the 9th King. The Empress had said that seeing the 9 kings was equivalent to seeing her, yet Ling Han was audacious enough to pat her head. However, little did she know that Ling Han had even smacked the Empress bottom just then. Chapter 1146, Gathering of Prodigies. Chapter 1146, Gathering of Prodigies. After appeasing Hu Feiyun and getting her to cultivate, Ling Han took Shui Yenyu to the side. The first thing he did was give her a passionate kiss. They hadn't seen each other for over 2 years, and he truly missed this beautiful and bewitching woman. Shui Yenyu tried to break free at the start, yet her body quickly went limp. She collapsed into Ling Han's embrace, and her beautiful face flushed a deep shade of red. Her eyes were as seductive as could be. "Don't," she wanted to push him away, yet at the same time, she also wanted to stay in his embrace. "Wife, you've been poisoned. This poison can only be cleared away if I sleep with you." Ling Han's expression became serious, and he said, "This poison is called love, and it's the most potent poison in the world. However, if I don't sacrifice myself for you, who will?" Shui Yenyu instantly wanted to roll her eyes. Ling Han was clearly aroused himself, yet he was still trying to find a seemingly legitimate excuse. He was far too shameless. However, she couldn't think straight after being passionately kissed by Ling Han, so she dazedly nodded her head. Only after a while did she realize that this was not the place for such things. However, Ling Han greedily kissed her a few more times, causing her to become even more dazed and spaced out. Right now, all she wanted was to be fiercely taken by this male. "I love you," she murmured. "I love you too." Ling Han moved his fingers dexterously, and Shui Yenyu's enchanting naked body quickly appeared before him. He dragged a finger across her jade-like body, completely igniting up her flames of lust. "Love me." Shui Yenyu wrapped her arms around Ling Han's neck. She hadn't seen her lover for 2 years, and she had been especially worried about him, even though she knew he was definitely safe. After seeing him again, her yearning for him quickly dissolved into flames of lust that seemed as if they wanted to swallow Ling Han whole. "Darling." Ling Han passionately kissed this seductive beauty. He wasn't going to stop at just a taste this time. He was going to turn her into his woman. "Han, be gentle," she said in a barely decipherable voice. "I will." He passionately thrust inside her. Ling Han and Shui Yenyu lay among a field of flowers. Shui Yenyu was cuddled up in Ling Han's lap, a satisfied smile on her face. "Baddie, you were only in a rush to do me because you actually want to marry Her Majesty." Shui Yenyu couldn't help but pinch Ling Han after hearing him explain his situation with Empress Luanxing. Ling Han hurriedly shook his head, and said, "That was something between you and me. It had nothing to do with others. Wife, you're so beautiful and enchanting, and I've already held back for so long. Weren't you afraid that I would be so pent up that I became sick?" Damn pervert. Although they had already become one, Shui Yenyu still couldn't endure Ling Han's teasing. Her face instantly flushed red. Ling Han's lust was instantly aroused when he saw her embarrassed and seductive expression. They were cuddled together, so how could Shui Yenyu not detect his little buddy's movements? Her eyes instantly widened. "Wife, it's time for round 2. Ling Han laughed loudly as he pressed Shui Yenyu under his body. Then, he started to launch a new round of attacks. Once, twice, thrice. This was Shui Yenyu's first taste of lovemaking, so she naturally couldn't get enough. Meanwhile, Ling Han was also intoxicated by this seductive beauty, and it seemed as if he were going to forget all matters and lose himself in pleasure. The two of them only concluded their passionate lovemaking experience after 3 entire days. They finally exited the Black Tower, yet Hu Feiyun was already full of complaints. She had been cultivating under the reincarnation tree, where 1 day was equivalent to 1 year. Moreover, she had cultivated for 5 days straight, and she had almost gone crazy from boredom. She shouted that she wanted to go out. Ling Han shook his head. Who would have thought that Empress Luan Xing also had such an innocent and ditzy side to her? What would it look like if such kind of personality was displayed by the Empress? He was extremely eager to see it. After exiting the Black Tower, Shui Yenyu immediately started to move out of her old residence. She was naturally going to move in with Ling Han. That way, she could cultivate in the outside world during the day, thereby absorbing the spiritual qi and increasing her origin power. At night, she would enter the Black Tower and comprehend the great Tao under the reincarnation tree, thereby increasing the speed of her cultivation as much as possible. Ling Han could keep 3 followers, yet he had only taken 1 so far. Thus, it was entirely possible for him to let Shui Yenyu into his palace to cultivate as long as no one snitched on them. Shui Yenyu wouldn't need to relinquish her identity of an ordinary disciple, either. Shui Yenyu's main focus was on cultivation, while Ling Han's main focus was on alchemy. He needed money. His divine demon sword was still only a level 3 god tool, and he needed to elevate it to level 4, level 5, and so on. However, that would require a countless amount of level 3 and level 4 godly metal, and purchasing them would cost an astronomical amount. Ling Han did indeed have a lot of true origin stones, yet it was still far from enough. The highest level pill he could refine right now was the mysterious azure pill, with each pill being able to sell for several thousand true origin stones. As for the ingredients, he had already planted them in the Black Tower. It wouldn't be long before he could harvest them, and this would greatly reduce his expenditure. However, Ling Han wanted to refine pills of even higher levels. This was because refining a cauldron of higher level pills would take around the same time, yet the profit that he could make would increase significantly. In addition, he definitely had to leave enough time to cultivate, and thus it was extremely important to pick the right type of pill to refine. Of course, he still hadn't obtained any higher level pill recipe yet, so he naturally had to stick with refining the mysterious azure pill. Ling Han regretted not asking Empress Luan Xing to command the Alchemy Institution to make a copy of all of their pill recipes for him. If he had done that, he would have been able to slowly study and digest the recipes. It was a shame that he and Empress Luan Xing hadn't been on such good terms at that time. Anyhow, this didn't matter. It wasn't as if he wasn't going to return to the joint peace planet. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was knocking on his door. Fan Yu hurriedly went to answer the door. He returned after a while, and he handed an invitation to Ling Han. "Young Master Han, this is an invitation for you." Ling Han accepted the letter and skimmed over it. A few seed-level prodigies were hosting a gathering where they would enjoy some tea and discuss their understandings of Tao. This gathering would take place tomorrow afternoon, and all seed-level prodigies at the Mountain River tier were welcome to attend. They had all entered the sect for quite some time now, yet they still had yet to properly gather together. The timing is just right. They didn't do this just to suit me, did they? Ling Han said with a smile. He had obliterated Gan Shiyun's god tool, and he had even taken the remains as his spoils. This woman definitely wouldn't let this matter slide. There are 6 people who have formed 5 mountains and rivers, and this is a great opportunity for me to see just how strong they are. The next day, Ling Han confidently strolled toward the mountain peak by himself. This gathering was held atop the White Frost Peak. This peak was exclusive to seed-level prodigies, so it was impossible for key disciples and ordinary disciples to come and spectate their battles no matter how much they wanted to. The White Frost Peak was especially tall, yet this kind of height was nothing much to cultivators at the mountain river tier. Ling Han was only walking at a strolling pace, yet he still arrived atop the peak in just an hour's time. Please show your invitation. This peak was extremely spacious, and there were 2 young men standing by either side of the entrance. Their auras were quite powerful, yet they could only stand guard at the gates. They were probably someone's followers, though they seemed quite remarkable for mere followers. One could imagine just how powerful the seed who they followed was. Ling Han handed his invitation over. One of the young men looked over it, and a hint of earnestness instantly appeared on his face. "Oh, it's young Master Han. Please enter." The peak was filled with stones of all shapes and sizes. These stones were probably seats. Right now, most of the stones were already taken. Ling Han looked around, and he saw a couple of familiar faces. Xiao Sisi, Su Jing, Duan, Quan Lishuan, the Rain Emperor, and Ding Ping. The last 2 clearly didn't recognize Ling Han. They hadn't heard his name yet, so they naturally wouldn't think that he was Ling Han. They merely glanced at him before retracting their gazes. Another few people arrived after him. There was Xia Wook, and there was also the Ditz in Hu Feiyun. There was also Gan Shiyun. She glared at Ling Han once she arrived, a baleful and frosty aura emanating from her body. Chapter 1147, Tasting Tea and Discussing Dao. Chapter 1147, Tasting Tea and Discussing Dao. Ling Han was naturally unafraid. In fact, he couldn't even be bothered to pay attention to her. He casually retrieved a divine fruit and started chomping down on it. This was only a level 2 divine fruit, so it wasn't all that valuable. However, Ling Han was genuinely eating it as if it were just a mere fruit. Many people couldn't help but label him as extravagant in their minds. Gan Shiyun almost exploded in rage. This person was actually eating fruit as if he couldn't see her at all. He was treating her threatening glare as if it were nothing. Damn it. More and more people arrived, and when the sun rose to its peak, no other person arrived. The stones were all taken, yet there were still some people who were standing. These were followers. They stood around the edges as they didn't have the right to stand closer to the center. The number of stones was definitely the same as the number of seeds. Since they were all taken, it was clear that everyone who had been invited to this gathering had arrived. This was the first gathering of the seeds, so everyone was extremely curious about the others. Moreover, each seed was filled with confidence and belief that they were invincible. Thus, they naturally wanted to take advantage of this gathering to assert their position. Everyone's arrived. A man stood up and smiled at everyone before saying, "Perhaps some of you don't know who I am yet. So, let me introduce myself. I'm He Dao, and I entered the sect 900 years ago. This person is incredibly strong," Ling Han said in his mind. He Dao's aura was obscure, and it was as deep and as profound as the sea. It was extremely likely that he had formed a 5th mountain and river, and doing so had allowed him to develop this obscure yet powerful aura. Ling Han wouldn't have thought this if he'd been on the Joint Peace Planet. However, this was the Majestic Heaven sect, a sect that was overflowing with countless supreme prodigies. Moreover, Elder Hai Yun had said that there was a total of 7 seeds who had formed 5 mountains and rivers, including him. This statement had only encompassed the mountain-river tier. If it were expanded to include the sun-moon tier, the number of people would definitely be more than 7. So, here's He Dao. He can definitely rank inside the top 5 among seeds at the mountain-river tier. Look, the person beside him is Wu Zhe. He's also a seed-level prodigy. In fact, he's on par with He Dao. Together with Wu Wentong, Shi Angua, Shen Zhua, and Kuang Peishan, the 6 of them are called the 6 Small Kings. There were people whispering to each other, and Ling Han understood the situation after hearing their conversation. The so-called 6 kings were the 6 mountain river tier disciples who had formed 5 mountains and rivers. Haha, this is a tea-tasting gathering, so of course there needs to be tea, He Dao said with a chuckle. He retrieved a small cauldron from his spatial spirit tool, and then placed a teapot on top of it. He started to brew tea. He wasn't using ordinary fire, but rather fire that was spitting out from his palm. There were divine patterns intertwined inside the flames, and it was clear that he was actually using the regulations of the Great Tao as his fire source. Ordinary metals would definitely be melted by such divine flames. Moreover, being as powerful as he was, perhaps even level 4 godly metal could be slowly melted by his flames. However, his cauldron was able to withstand these intense flames even though it looked small and ordinary. It showed no signs of melting under the intense heat of the divine flames. This is no ordinary cauldron, Ling Han said in his mind. He wasn't thinking about obtaining this god tool to use as a cauldron. Rather, there was only one thought going through his mind: he wanted to slash this cauldron apart and use it to elevate the quality of his divine demon sword. Theoretically speaking, the water in the cauldron should have boiled in no time since it was being heated by such powerful divine flames. However, half an hour had passed, and not a wisp of smoke had drifted from the spout of the cauldron yet. There's extreme night frosty ice inside, so it'll take a while for it to melt. He Dao smiled, and said, however, our tea tasting and Dao discussions will go on for 4 or 5 days at the very least. So, why don't we discuss Dao first? We can taste the tea later. What? Extreme night frosty ice? Many people cried out in surprise. Meanwhile, some people didn't know what this was, and they only understood after listening to the explanations of others. Extreme night frosty ice only forms in the extreme southern regions of the flying cloud planet. That place is bone-chillingly cold, and it's blanketed by snow and ice all year round. Moreover, there are countless terrifying caves hidden under the snow and ice. If one steps over them, they might fall into the cave and be sealed in ice forever. Even Sun-Moon tier elites aren't willing to go to that place. After all, there aren't any precious godly medicines or valuable demonic beasts there. However, extreme night frosty ice is one of the few special local products. It's formed from the unique Great Tao of the extreme southern lands, and drinking such ice will allow one to comprehend the mysteriousness of ice. If ordinary mountain river tier cultivators come into contact with extreme night frosty ice, they'll immediately be frozen. They'll suffer grave wounds even if they don't die. As expected of senior brother he's even able to get his hands on extreme night frosty ice. How astonishing! Although prodigies were generally unwilling to admit that others were more impressive than them, the truth had already been placed in front of their eyes. If they lacked even the courage to acknowledge someone else's strength, how could they ever wish to surpass them? Thus, everyone looked at He Dao in admiration. He Dao smiled faintly as he continued to boil the extreme night frosty ice. I only obtained this by luck. I was chasing an extreme plain ice fox, and I happened to enter an ice cave where I found a few slabs of extreme night frosty ice. I pondered for a while, and I figured that I may as well bring it back and brew some tea for my junior brothers and sisters to taste. Someone was a little puzzled, and they softly said, "It's such a small pot. Will we even get half a cup each?" The cup that he spoke of was more so the extremely small type of teacup, the kind where its content could be downed in a small mouthful. Don't worry, there's another separate space inside the teapot. Although it's not that big, I'm sure it's big enough to provide us with enough tea, He Dao said with a smile. Brother, he has provided us with extreme night frosty ice as tea water. I can't be greedy, either, so I'll offer some serene poplar tea leaves. We can use it to make tea in a moment, Wuja chimed in. Pu. Many people instantly spluttered in astonishment. In fact, they even wore expressions of excitement and eagerness. Serene poplar tea was definitely extremely valuable. It could help cultivators comprehend Tao, and even Sun-Moon tier elites wouldn't necessarily be able to obtain such tea. As expected of a member of the 6 kings. The things that they casually took out could easily astound others. Only the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping were unmoved. How could serene poplar tea move them? In terms of help to one's comprehension, how could it compare to the reincarnation tree? That was a tree that could turn one day's worth of comprehension into 1 year's worth. Could serene poplar tea achieve this? Moreover, they could comprehend Tao under the reincarnation tree every single day. Meanwhile, how many pieces of serene poplar tea leaves were there? However, there's only a limited number of tea leaves, 10 to be exact. Wu Zhe paused for a moment before continuing. How about this? Those who rank inside the top 10 will receive a tea leaf in their tea. What does everyone think? Although the tea leaves would be placed in the teapot to begin with, giving the tea extremely good comprehension effects, how could a clear cup of tea compare to genuinely having a tea leaf in one's tea? Everyone nodded in approval as they rubbed their fists and prepared to fight. Since they were discussing Tao, those who were more powerful would naturally receive more benefits. This was the eternal truth of the cultivation world. The strongest would become kings. I'm Fang Jin. Which junior brother or junior sister is willing to challenge me? A youth immediately leaped out and referred to everyone else as his juniors. This was a display of confidence, and it showed that he was confident in his abilities to become a senior. "Heh, I'll challenge you," another youth said as he leaped forward. "Please." The two of them clasped their hands in respect before immediately launching into a fight. Their battle was extremely intense. Chapter 1148, Disciples' Battle. Chapter 1148, Disciples' Battle. The cultivation levels of these two people weren't high, with both of them being at the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. However, they were naturally talented in their own way, or else they wouldn't have become seeds of the majestic heaven sect. For example, Fang Jin was radiating with a frosty aura that could transform into ice. As such, his opponent's attacks would be sealed by ice before they could even reach him. Meanwhile, his opponent was no pushover, either. He could transform into lightning, and this was a technique that was even more powerful than the thunderclap ninth heaven. Divine patterns hovered around his body, and he wasn't afraid to take hard hits from his opponent. Ordinary mountain river tier cultivators would stand no chance against them, even if they were one minor level above them. This was because their attacks would be ineffective against these seeds. However, although physical attacks were ineffective against them, they could still be wounded by attacks that contained intertwining divine patterns. For example, Fang Jin could wound his opponent's lightning body if he stabbed him with a sword that was formed from his frosty aura and laced with intertwining divine patterns. On the flip side, his opponent could also threaten him greatly when he launched spears of lightning toward him. The two of them quickly became serious, and they both started to unleash their full powers. Putting aside their cultivation level, their battle prowess was indeed very impressive. Sure enough, seeds couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han couldn't help but wonder whether he could suppress these two if they were at the same cultivation level. It was hard to say. Ling Han compared his battle prowess to theirs. In terms of strength, these two people were no weaker than him when he had been at the same cultivation level as them. However, this was before taking into account their trump cards. For example, he possessed the fast technique and the annihilating dragon star arrow, and these were secret techniques that could lead to huge changes in his battle prowess. In addition, Ling Han also cultivated the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, which allowed him to develop an astonishing physique. If he battled against someone at the same cultivation level, he was already set to be undefeatable. After battling for a long time, Fang Jin finally won by a small margin. Both of them retreated to rest, giving the battle arena to the next two challengers. Several other people went up to battle after them, and all of their battles were delightful and intense. They were all prodigies of the sect, and thus none of them would rely on a higher cultivation level to defeat their opponent. Everyone chose an opponent who was at the same cultivation level as Thema, at least within one minor level, regardless of whether they were challenging someone or being challenged by someone. Although a difference in one minor level could also lead to a power difference of 3 stars, nothing could be done about this. There was no such thing as absolute fairness in the world. In fact, being able to win or tie while being 1 or even 2 minor levels beneath one's opponent would appear even more impressive. Achieving such a feat would exemplify one's standing as a prodigy. Although Ling Han was itching to fight, Only He Dao and Wu Zhe were worthy of being his opponent. The others were genuinely too weak to pose a challenge to him. He was unwilling to pick on others, so he simply spectated the battles from his seat. Spectating battles could also aid one's comprehension, and he did indeed attain some enlightenment by watching the others battle. He was able to better combine his fast technique with the power of regulations. At its most fundamental level, cultivation can be categorized into utilizing regulations and destroying regulations. So, I can achieve the strongest Tao in the world if I'm able to unleash both of these qualities to the extreme. However, I'll need to fully comprehend the regulations if I'm to wield them to the extreme. Otherwise, how will I utilize them, and how will I destroy them? Ling Han nodded to himself. Everyone here was cultivating toward a different path, yet all of them could be of help to him. I'm Ding Ping. Please. He was lost in thought, yet he suddenly saw his disciple leap into the battle arena. His opponent was a young and fairly good-looking woman. She wore a long crimson dress, and she appeared radiant but still extremely charming. Ding Ping blushed upon seeing this beauty. He was young, and the time he had spent cultivating in seclusion far outweighed the time he had spent traveling outside and training. Thus, he was sorely lacking in experience of all sorts. Lan Luan. The young woman immediately charged toward him after announcing her name. Her weapon was a sword, and a boundless sword chi swept outward as she thrust her sword forward. Even space was torn apart, with countless fissures forming in the air. This wasn't fatal, yet it was incredibly annoying. Space had been distorted, and this would affect one's movements. Perhaps one could have advanced 15 meters with a single leap normally. However, the distortion of space meant that one might only be able to advance 9 meters. Moreover, the direction of one's leap might also be different from their intended one. The blush on Ding Ping's face immediately disappeared once he started to exchange blows with his opponent. He had experienced several battles, so he understood just how cruel and ruthless battles could be. Once on the battlefield, his opponent was his enemy. He couldn't go easy on them just because they were a beautiful woman. He roared loudly as he charged forward and swung his fists violently. He was born special, and the composition of his bones was different from others. He could unleash his power 100-fold, and this would elevate his power by 2 stars even though he was already at the mountain river tier. This was extremely astonishing. Ding Ping had almost reached a state of perfection at the shattering void tier, and after reaching the mountain river tier, his power could surpass a little over 5 stars. Add to that these 2 stars of explosive power, and there was no need for him to use any secret techniques. His fists were his most powerful weapon. His power could surpass a whopping 7 stars. He was so powerful that he could easily suppress his opponent. The prodigies were stunned upon seeing Ding Ping unleash his full power. Although Ding Ping had already entered the majestic heavens sect for a year, everyone had been working hard and cultivating before this gathering. This lad is astonishing. Power was a core attribute to cultivators. All secret techniques and martial arts techniques were built upon the basis of power. However, power was relatively hard to improve. In most cases, one's power would only be on par with their cultivation level. In fact, one would be regarded as a prodigy if their power could surpass their cultivation level by just 1 star. Even the power of seed-level prodigies like them could only surpass 5 to 6 stars. If they wanted to surpass 7 stars, they would need to form 5 mountains and rivers and break through the barrier that limited their power. It could be said that a power of 6 stars was the limit of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. However, Ding Ping had broken through this limitation and obtained a power of 7 stars. Moreover, he had done so without the help of any secret technique. His punch was extremely ordinary, and there were no divine patterns flashing around his fist. However, it appeared as indestructible as if it were a punch from God. Lan Luan's cultivation level was identical to Ding Ping's, with both of them being at the peak stage of the low extreme. However, her power was far weaker than his, so she was completely suppressed and unable to counterattack. She was a seed, though, so she naturally wouldn't admit defeat so easily. "Hiya," she cried softly, and streaks of blue light burst from her slender body. They surprisingly formed dozens of palm-sized birds that swooped toward Ding Ping. "Huh!" Those are blue-beaked birds. These are ancient divine birds, and according to legends, they once pecked a saint to death. Someone immediately yelped in surprise, revealing an astonishing rumor as they did so. Saints were the most powerful beings of the immortal realm, they were the legends of the legends. However, a blue-beaked bird had actually pecked a saint to death. What kind of terrifying existence was this? At least 100 blue-beaked birds swooped toward Ding Ping. They opened their sharp beaks, and everyone could see the swirls of divine patterns that decorated them. One could imagine just how mighty the power of their pecks would definitely be no weaker than an attack from a god tool. Even saints could be pecked to death, and this proved just how powerful these birds were. Although they were only unleashed from the body of mountain river tier cultivator, their might was still relatively impressive. Ding Ping was unfazed, and he continued to launch punches toward his opponent. The might of his fists compressed the air and formed layers of waves that obliterated the blue-beaked birds before they could even reach him. Lan Luan let out a shrill cry, and the blue light that was bursting from her body gathered together to form a giant blue-beaked bird. The aura that radiated from this bird instantly soared significantly. Chapter 1149 The Rain Emperor was still forceful. Chapter 1149 The Rain Emperor was still forceful. Lan Luan's cultivation level was at the peak of the low extreme of mountain river tier, but presently, the aura this blue-beaked bird was exuding had shockingly reached the medium extreme, and was even the late stage of the medium extreme. Her battle prowess was naturally even more frightening than before. When everyone saw this, they were all astounded. This was equivalent to boosting her battle prowess by a whole minor level. The battle prowess of people like them would be capable of surpassing 5 stars, and with a boost of another minor level, the battle prowess would directly spike to 9 stars. This was really too shocking. However, to deliver this kind of attack, the strain on Lan Luan was also exceedingly heavy. Her beautiful face had turned completely pale, and there was blood seeping out from the corner of her lips. Her life essence had suddenly dropped greatly. Perhaps delivering this attack would even shorten her lifespan itself. This young girl really had a powerful competitive spirit. It was merely a spar, and she actually shortened her own lifespan. Even if she won, it would be damaging her opponent by paying the price of damage to herself. Ding Ping rushed forward with a great shout, but the moment his fists came into contact with that blue-beaked bird, his whole person was sent flying out. With a bang, he collapsed onto the ground, and his hands were severely injured. His arms were completely bloody. Lan Luan did not appear to be any better. She sat abruptly on the ground, covered by sweat, an air of weakness exuding from her. If this blow of hers had not succeeded, then it would have been definitely impossible for her to deliver a second attack. She could only claim to have won narrowly. However, Ding Ping had not used any powerful moves before he had been defeated by this powerful move which she had expended her life essence in return for. In truth, this was reasonable. After all, they were in the same cultivation level. The Rain Emperor leaped out, grabbed Ding Ping, and brought him to stand beside the rock. He couldn't help but shake his head. Actually, he was more in favor of Ding Ping's victory, but this guy seemed to have fallen for his opponent, and actually did not make any powerful moves, and chose to take her attack head-on instead. Wasn't this seeking his own defeat? After he placed Ding Ping down, he strode down into the arena, and called out, "Who would battle with me?" Though he had laid down his identity of an emperor, he had not abandoned the pride that belonged to one. In terms of bearing, there were really not many people here that could be a match for the Rain Emperor, though he was still only in the early stage of the medium extreme. "Haha, I shall." A young man wearing a green shirt leaped out. He was dressed completely in rich robes, and was also wearing a great number of ornaments. Furthermore, each of the ornaments he was wearing exuded a vague aura. They were definitely out of the common run. This man either had to be a newly rich upstart or his clan was too noble if he was wearing so many accessories. That is Chao Xian. Chao? Someone from the Chao clan? That's right, it is that Chao clan. Gasp. Chao clan was a great clan, and had once produced a great elite of the Eternal River tier very, very long ago, possessing supreme glory once. But when that great elite dispersed into Dao, The Chao clan had no qualified successors to carry on their undertakings. As a result, they were naturally not as glorious as they once had been. This Chao Xian had ambition, and desired to revive the glory of his ancestors. Indeed, he was amazingly talented. However, he was too arrogant, thinking that not one person in this place could be his equal. At most, all of you will only be capable of reaching the heavenly body tier, but I am the one who will reach the eternal river tier. However, his cultivation level presently was still too weak, merely in the late stage of the medium extreme of mountain river tier. After all, he was too young, and had only cultivated for close to 100 years. Yet, he had managed to reach this level after a mere century. This was very impressive. As his cultivation level increased, the Rain Emperor began to look younger and younger, but no matter how much younger, it was impossible that he would regain his looks from when he was in his teens and 20s. Presently, he looked to be about 27 to 28 years old, and among this group of young people, he appeared to be much older. There was nothing to be done. In terms of actual age, the Rain Emperor was younger than the majority of them, but who asked him to have already been close to 60 years old when he finally stepped into the flower blossom tier? In everyone's eyes, this was proof that the Rain Emperor lacked sufficient talent. Wasn't it? For prodigies like them, who had broken through to the flower blossom tier when they were merely 7 or 8 years old, their bodies would only grow, but would not age in the slightest. What did aging signify? That your cultivation level would not be able to keep up, and your life essence would be greatly lost. Otherwise, why would one have aged? Chao Xian bore a smile on his face, though he was internally disdainful. He was actually a seed just like this kind of trash. This was practically an insult to him. Fine then, he would give this person a lesson. The best scenario would be that he could let the Rain Emperor withdraw from the sect of his own volition to avoid pulling his own standing as a seed. Here I come. He had a very low opinion of Rain Emperor, and when he pressed down with his palm in attack, it was done very carelessly. The Rain Emperor made his move. Hong, his forceful presence surged in all directions, his fists falling like rain. What? A shocked expression immediately appeared on Chao Xian's face. He had not thought that the Rain Emperor's attack would be so fierce. He was indeed powerful, but he might not be stronger than the Rain Emperor. Hence, now that the Rain Emperor had taken the initiative, he was naturally forced into retreat, and could only defend himself against the incoming attacks. How rich and abundant was the Rain Emperor's battle experience? It could be claimed that if the two of them had the same cultivation level and trump cards, even Ling Han was not sure he could be able to defeat the Rain Emperor. Now that he had the upper hand, his attacks were endless and pervasive. Who could underestimate the Rain Emperor? As someone who had broken through to the mountain river tier with 19 stars of strength, though he had not perfected his cultivation, 1 star of strength on shattering void tier would have an influence of half a star at most in the mountain river tier. It would definitely not lead to a world of difference. Peng, 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 peng. The Rain Emperor continued his fury of attacks, and Chao Xian was forced into retreat. When he had taken his 17th step back, Chao Xian spat out a mouthful of blood, and was sent flying with a single punch. Thanks for the win. The Rain Emperor stopped his attack. This was merely a spar, so he naturally had to take care not to overdo it with his attack. Chao Xian leaped up, and his face was completely flushed. How could this be endured? He had looked down greatly on the Rain Emperor, yet did not even manage to get a chance to fight back before he was defeated by the Rain Emperor. This was practically a plaque of humiliation on the path of his cultivation. He was someone who would become an elite of the Eternal River tier, so how could he accept this kind of terrible defeat? Again, he leaped out. This time, he dared not be careless again. The light of great Tao surged from his whole body, and interwoven divine patterns appeared, boosting his battle prowess to the peak. The spectators looked on, and they were all shaking their heads internally. You had already lost, yet were so sore about your defeat. That would only lead to others having an even lower opinion of you. Thus, talent was only one factor of the equation. This was the prerequisite for becoming an elite, but if you wanted to become an elite, mere talent was far from enough. But they had to admit that the present Chao Xian was very strong, and could definitely not be taken lightly. The Rain Emperor humphed coldly. He had also been angered as well. He looked down on such a sore loser. Then, he merely had to punch him out again. He shot out a punch at Chao Xian. Peng, peng, peng. One punch followed after another. Though Chao Xian was prepared this time, he was still forced into a retreat by the Rain Emperor's attacks. He was actually still being completely subdued. Hey, why is this guy's fist technique so frightening? In terms of power, it would be Chao Xian who is slightly superior, but why would he be at a disadvantage in a head-on exchange of blows? That person's fist technique is too powerful. Every punch seemed to have condensed the bearing of heaven and earth. Hiss, he has the potential to become a grandmaster of his era. The people here all knew what was what, and they were incredibly stunned. The Rain Emperor's cultivation level could not be considered the apex in this place, but in terms of fist techniques, he had far surpassed all the so-called seeds, and reached a height that others could only look up to. Second brother's fist technique is close to Dao, haha, this is worthy of celebration. Ling Han murmured quietly, a smile appearing on his face. In the great tomb in the galaxy, he had seen the sword of the Great Dao, and the Rain Emperor's fist technique seemed to be similarly boosted by Great Dao, so its might was naturally incredible. However, he had been inspired after obtaining the sword of the Great Dao, and only then did he comprehend his own path, while the Rain Emperor had completely relied on his own comprehension abilities. With such a comparison, even Ling Han had to admit he was convinced of the Rain Emperor's genius. This second brother of his was really born an extraordinary genius of martial arts. Chapter 1150 Vile Conduct. Chapter 1150 Vile Conduct. The Rain Emperor had truly been angered, and after 10 punches, Chao Xian was once again sent flying. Too powerful. They were obviously of similar cultivation levels. Chao Xian was even 2 sub-minor levels higher than him, but within 10 moves, he was already defeated. This was too unbelievable. It should be known that they were all seeds, and were all super geniuses. With similar cultivation levels, it should have been a closely locked battle no matter what. Yet, the result was a completely one-sided battle. Moreover, the Rain Emperor's cultivation level was slightly lower, and there was a gap of 2 stars of power. Yet Ling Han knew that the path the Rain Emperor walked was a path of forcefulness and ferocity. If he could win, then about 10 moves would be enough, and if the battle dragged onto from 10 to 100 moves, it was proof that the Rain Emperor was actually at a disadvantage. Chao Xian had been defeated twice, and his face was no longer flushed red. Instead, he bore a livid expression. He could no longer find the face to stay here. Covering his face, he left. If he stayed here any longer, the looks from all the spectators would be like swords and knives, and might cause him to collapse. The Rain Emperor's fighting spirit burned, and he asked, "Who else would do battle with me?" Everyone looked at each other. Those who had a similar cultivation level with the Rain Emperor had absolutely no certainty that they could defeat the Rain Emperor, and for those whose cultivation levels were higher than the Rain Emperor, they could not find the nerve to make a move. Previously, even Chao Xian, who was in the late stage of the medium extreme, had been easily defeated. Then, it was obvious that the late stage of the medium extreme was not quite good enough. But if one was in the high extreme, this gap was a little too big, wasn't it? Who would have the nerve to take that kind of advantage? Hence, the Rain Emperor asked for a battle. Though there was more than 100 people here, still, no one accepted his challenge. Ho, we can't let the atmosphere get cold. How about this? I'll come and fight. Wu Zhi stood up. The others all looked at one another. This was one of the 6 king tiers. If he made a move, aside from He Dao, who would be able to match him? Moreover, the gap between cultivation levels was really too huge, wasn't it? Could this even be considered a spar? To be fair, I will seal off my cultivation level, and we shall battle with the same cultivation level, Wu Zhi said. He pressed a few times on some parts of his body, and true enough, his aura immediately dropped to a level about similar to the Rain Emperor's. "Junior brother, is this fair?" he asked with a smile. The Rain Emperor did not answer. Instead, he merely shouted, and fighting spirit burned strongly in his eyes. Then, he began a mad barrage of attacks towards Wu Zhi. Peng, 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 peng. His punches fell like rain, and even someone as strong as Wu Zhe could actually only parry, and was forced into continuous retreat. Everyone was shocked, struck mute with astonishment. That was Wu Zhe, one of the 6 publicly acknowledged king tiers. They were capable of sweeping aside all mountain river tier cultivators, and only the other 5 would qualify to be a match for him. But now, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, it was actually the Rain Emperor who was pressing down on Wu Zhe. This was really an incredible shock. When the Rain Emperor, too, reached the peak stage of the mountain river tier in future, wouldn't there be 7 great king tiers then? Although there was a serene smile on Wu Zhe's face, he was actually cursing internally. He, too, had not foreseen that the Rain Emperor's fist technique would be as powerful as this. When he had watched earlier, he had only thought it was fierce, but now that he himself was on the receiving end, he realized that the latter's fist technique was practically close to heavenly Tao. Every attack of his fist was like the heavens itself pressing down on him. He was completely incapable of resisting. It was not that he had no means of fighting back, but in terms of power, it had to be a complete domination. But now that their cultivation levels were the same, what did he have that could dominate over the Rain Emperor? He could not accept the result of being defeated, even if he had suppressed his cultivation level. As a king tier, how could he lose in a battle of equal cultivation levels? He suddenly threw out a punch, and forcefully greeted the Rain Emperor with his own attack. Peng! The 2 fists crashed into each other, and all of a sudden, a frightening shock wave was generated. Even if all the people here were seed-level geniuses, they still had to stretch out a shield of origin power. Otherwise, if they were scraped by this gust of wind, it would definitely not be a pleasant experience. Wu Zhe and the Rain Emperor pulled back at the same time. Ting, ting, ting. Wu Zhe took 7 steps back, whereas the Rain Emperor retreated 9 steps. In terms of power, he was at a slight disadvantage, but the difference was that there was blood seeping out of the Rain Emperor's fist. His arm was also visibly bent and broken. It was obvious that the bone was broken. In this clash, the Rain Emperor had lost completely. As expected of senior brother Wu. His place as one of the 6 king tiers had definitely not come through boasting. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, he is invincible, the spectators praised. This result was what they had imagined. Yet Ling Han's eyes frosted over as he stared at Wu Zhe. Just now, the number of divine patterns that had flickered on Wu Zhe's fist were as many as 91. This meant that though he had not used power above the medium extreme, he had used the power of regulations. Of course, it was not fair. Though power was the most important factor of a cultivator, regulations should similarly not be underestimated. Just like in the large galactic tomb, the power of that stone statue formation had not changed the whole time, but because the might of the divine patterns increased, the might of the stone statue formation had correspondingly risen as well. This should not have been possible for a cultivator to do, but Wu Zhe, one with a superior cultivation level facing an opponent of an inferior cultivation level in a situation wherein power was unchanging, could increase the might of his divine patterns. The results could be claimed to be exactly the same as the stone statue formation's workings. Wu Zhe had done this very secretly, but how could he possibly fool Ling Han, who possessed the Eye of Truth? You dare to bully my second brother? Fury abruptly surged within Ling Han. He glared fixedly at Wu Zhe. He would definitely avenge this loss. The Rain Emperor was a straightforward character. He, too, had sensed something off, but a loss was still a loss. There was no excuse. Hence, he nodded, and said, I have lost. While speaking, he retreated back to his original position and Saturday. Thank you for the battle. Wu Zhe made a pretense of being modest. Senior brother disciple Wu, please fight me. Ling Han was just about to walk down into the arena when he saw someone was a step earlier than he. He had already leaped into the arena before him, so Ling Han could only choose to temporarily abandon his plans. This person was Su Jing. Please. Wu Zhe released the restrictions on his cultivation level. His opponent was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, so there was no need for him to deliberately suppress his cultivation level. As a senior disciple, I will limit my moves to 10. As long as junior brother Su can take 10 moves from me, it will be considered my loss. How confidently had he spoken such words? But it was not going too far. If he did not suppress his cultivation level, he possessed the power of 5 mountain rivers, and his strength would reach 7 stars at least. Even if there was only a gap of a single star between 6 and 7 stars, this gap of a single star was extremely massive. Su Jing did not dare be careless. His opponent was a king tier of mountain river tier, and had truly stood on the pinnacle of this domain. His strength had exceeded all imagination. He used a powerful move at the first instance. Endless divine light entwined around his entire body, and in a single instant, his body had turned into a volcano. There were bright crimson flows of lava surging all over his body, and he breathed very hot air from his nostrils. Was this still human? This was obviously a giant of lava and fire. Wu Zhi indulged him calmly. Someone who had not formed his 5th mountain river could not possibly know how powerful this cultivation level was. Even if there was only an additional star of strength, this was the pinnacle level. It was even harder to cultivate than the sun-moon tier. If one could not sweep aside all mountain river tier cultivators below this cultivation level, then what was the point of cultivating the pinnacle level in the first place? Su Jing shot out a palm strike, and the area was completely covered with crimson flames as lava gushed. It was as if doomsday had come. Everyone quickly put up a shield of origin power. This was battle prowess on the level of consummate level, and could not be compared to the previous battles at all. Boom, boom, boom. Su Jing attacked continuously, and Wu Zhi merely parried his blows casually. He appeared so completely careless, and very much at ease. 9 moves. Wu Zhi smiled, and said, "Please be careful, junior brother Su. I am about to counterattack." Chapter 1151, Might of King Tier. Chapter 1151, Might of King Tier. Wu Zhi shot out a palm strike, and it was as if the sky had collapsed, and like a star had fallen. Peng! Su Jing was instantly sent flying. Although he had once been praised as a king tier in the young generation, showed disdain for his peers, and had even managed to trample all over the elites of the mountain river tier from the previous generation, against a true king tier, he could only accept his defeat. After all, Wu Zhi had formed his 5th mountain river, and this was a qualitative domination. He was really too strong. However, it was not that Su Jing did not have a chance to catch up, or even surpass his opponent. As long as he, too, could form his 5th mountain river, anything was possible. But before that, he could only admit his defeat. Senior brother disciple Wu, I, too, would like to ask for your guidance. Xiao Sisi nimbly walked down into the arena. Ling Han couldn't help but feel gloomy. Why did everyone have to fight over the chance to fight with him? Forget it, you guys go ahead. When no one was left to challenge Wu Zhi, he would make his move. Wu Zhi looked at Xiao Sisi, a stunned light flashing in his eyes. Beautiful women were a resource, but they were very common. After all, the population of the immortal realm was too large, so a few great beauties could still be found somewhere. However, a beautiful woman that had the 3 merits of being incredibly talented in martial arts world, having potential to become a king tier, and coming from a powerful background was definitely a scarce resource. This beauty in front of him possessed all those merits, so she naturally would make men fall in love with her. It could be claimed that even if her cultivation level was slightly lower, and her natural talent slightly weaker, she could still make many men willingly fall at her feet. Junior sister, please. Wu Zhi's tone was gentle, exhibiting the tender and kind nature of a senior brother. He Dao smirked coldly. He naturally was aware of Wu Zhi's true nature. However, he did not believe that Xiao Sisi would be fooled by a few words from Wu Jihao. Could such a lovesick girl be nurtured and prioritized by her clan? Please do not be too strict on me, senior brother disciple. Xiao Sisi bowed delicately, showing off her womanly charms to the fullest. This show of weakness would naturally not engender the disdain of others. Instead, they would only think that she was well-behaved and respectful to her seniors. Their opinion of her would rise accordingly. A great many men were looking at her, captivated. Only Gan Shiyun was spitting internally, because this was a trick that she, too, liked to use. True enough, Wu Zhi's expression became even more indulgent, and his smile widened as he said, "Junior sister, please." Xiao Sisi's hands shook, and she actually drew a long spear. It was as long as 9 meters, and when she wielded it, it added a soldierly yet beautiful air to her bearing. Added with the fact that she was extraordinarily beautiful in the first place, she was even more attractive than before. Even one with Wu Zhe's mental state could not help but feel his heart throb. The others, who were even more unable to bear it, even swallowed. Go! Xiao Sisi wielded her spear, and began her attack on Wu Zhe. The spear spat out lightning, and it was like a dragon of lightning, extremely frightening. Wu Zhe was slightly stunned. Her abilities really could not be underestimated. Whoever thought she only had beauty and was a mere pretty face would be making a serious mistake. The spear pierced towards him, and one lightning bolt after another appeared from the body of the spear. They formed multiple snakes of lightning that spat out the fury of lightning at Wu Zhe. Quite interesting, Wu Zhe commented, smiling. If he had not formed his 5th mountain river, then he would really have been flustered by this strike in front of him. This woman could definitely become a formidable opponent to him. However, at present, his abilities were far above hers. Someone who had not formed the 5th mountain river could definitely not imagine how powerful this cultivation level was. He merely pushed out with his right hand. Wang, a navy blue hand of origin power appeared, and grabbed out at the spear. A mighty aura rolled out without bounds, and instantly suppressed Xiao Sisi's own aura. This really was not fearing someone who didn't know what was what, but fearing to be compared. When Xiao Sisi made her move just now, all were shaken. Who would dare to underestimate this woman? But as Wu Zhe made his own move forcefully, it completely suppressed Xiao Sisi's performance. This gap was really not just a little bit. Boom! The giant hand fell, and the spear's course was suddenly blocked. Then, it actually twisted as if it could not endure the massive pressure, and was about to break at any moment from the force. Xiao Sisi gave a soft shout, and endless flashes of lighting surged all over her body, her power spiking suddenly. Junior sister's abilities and talent are extremely impressive. Unfortunately, there is still a large gap between you and me. Without forming your 5th mountain river, you are ultimately still immortal. Wu Zhe stretched out a hand and pushed at empty air. The might of that large hand abruptly rose further, and forcefully pushed back at Xiao Sisi. A frightening power attacked, and Xiao Sisi hurriedly shook her right hand. The spear actually broke apart by itself. However, it was not broken, but had rather formed a shield in front of her, blocking this attack from Wu Zhe. So it seemed that her spear had not been forged out from a single piece of godly metal, but rather had been formed from innumerable small chains locking together. It could change form according to her will. Sure, Xiao Sisi's right hand waved, and the shield once again formed a spear, which she brandished towards Wu Zhe. Ha ha ha. Wu Zhe laughed loudly, not worried in the slightest. The large hand continued to fall, and suppressed Xiao Sisi to the point that she had no choice but to admit her defeat in just a few moves. Duan, Luo Jingren, Xia Wuk, and the others walked down into the arena to challenge him in succession, but they were all easily defeated by Wu Zhe, who showed the might of a king tier to the fullest. As expected of senior brother disciple Wu, he is too strong, so one could really form the 5th mountain river in the mountain river tier. I have always thought that this was a mere rumor. No wonder senior brother disciple Wu can become a king tier. After he formed the 5th mountain river, he could practically be considered to have achieved the sun-moon tier. It is a definite one-sided domination over other mountain river tier cultivators. I don't know if there is anyone who could take 10 moves from senior brother disciple Wu. What a joke. Have you seen any mountain river tier cultivator being able to take 10 moves from a sun-moon tier elite? It is definitely impossible. Everyone was filled with praise, and did not hide their admiration for Wu Zhe. Indeed, it was really too difficult to form the 5th mountain river. Yet Su Jing merely hummed quietly, and said, if it is merely a question of taking 10 moves, I feel that there is one person who is completely capable of accomplishing that. Xiao Sisi's eyes lit up immediately, and quipped, that's right. Duan nodded as well, and said, if that person was able to come, then there really would be a possibility that he could force senior brother disciple Wu to use more than 100 moves. Everyone was shocked. Who would they be speaking of that had managed to obtain the unanimous admiration of a few seed-level prodigies? Oh, and who is this person? Wu Zhe asked with a smile, but there was a sliver of disdain in the depths of his gaze. What a joke! Without forming the fifth mountain river, who would be able to be a match for him? Ling Han, Xiao Sisi, Duan, Su Jing, and the others replied simultaneously. Perhaps the battle wouldn't be resolved even with 100 moves, it may have to be dragged to more than 1,000 moves. Even Xia Wook spoke up. It was slightly unexpected that he would actually have such a high opinion of Ling Han. Wu Zhe couldn't help but get irritated. The battle wouldn't be resolved even with 1,000 moves. What kind of jokes were they spouting? The Rain Emperor and Ding Ping shared a look. One broke into a slight smile, while the other was incredibly proud. Oh, and who could this Ling Han be that he would be described so amazingly by junior sister and junior brother disciples? Why have I not seen him come to the sect? Wu Zhe asked. Xiao Sisi shook her head, and replied, when the large galactic tomb opened, he had entered with us. He even agreed to reunite with us in the majestic heaven sect, but I never thought that there would be no signs of him after our last meeting. This is really odd. Ha 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 ha. All of a sudden, a few seeds laughed loudly. The conversation had carried on for so long, and that person they spoke of hadn't even managed to enter the sect. Was he even qualified to be considered a prodigy? Chapter 1152 Who is Ling Han? Chapter 1152 Who is Ling Han? What are you laughing at? Hu Feiyun leaped out. Ling Han is the most awesome, the very strongest. Everyone was astonished. They had not expected yet another person to speak up for Ling Han. They were all seeds here. What seed-level prodigy was not proud and arrogant? Yet Ling Han himself had not even appeared, but had already engendered the extreme admiration of several seeds. This was really unimaginable. They became curious as well, wanting to see this mysterious man. How powerful exactly was this man, and how charismatic was he? Yet flames of jealousy were ignited in Wu Zhe's heart because these two extreme beauties, Hu Feiyun and Xiao Sisi, had shown a fondness for Ling Han. Hu Feiyun was even more so. She looked like she would come to blows with anyone who dared to speak badly of Ling Han. And this man had not even been qualified to enter into the majestic heaven sect. He was very displeased. Just think, as one of the 6 king tiers, usually, innumerable female disciples in the sect would throw themselves at him. However, his whole heart was concentrated on cultivation, so he had completely no interest in them. It was so rare that he had seen there were a few extremely beautiful women among the seeds this time, yet all of them exhibited great admiration for another man. Damn it! He had better not meet this Ling Han in future, or he would definitely beat him to death. What a joke! Since he is as powerful as you senior disciples claim, why had he not been recruited by the sect? A youth in green asked coldly. It was precisely Fu Liangye, who had been struck back by a sword light from Ling Han several days ago during the selection for followers. At this moment, his hand was still wrapped in bandages. Though that was merely a casual sword light from Ling Han, his martial intent was contained within. How could it be so easily expelled? Without expelling the martial intent, this wound would not heal. The way I see it, he is just a piece of trash. Everything is mere boasting, he said disdainfully. Rubbish. Ding Ping jumped out immediately. Pointing at Fu Liangye, he exclaimed, "Apologize now. And what relation do you have with this matter?" Fu Liangye did not dare be careless. Though this youth had been defeated by Lan Luan, his abilities themselves were incredibly powerful and forceful. He might not have a good chance of winning. Because Ling Han is my master, Ding Ping said with utmost seriousness. Without Ling Han, he wouldn't be where he was now. To Ding Ping, Ling Han was truth. One word from Ling Han, and he would even dare to brandish his fists at a saint, so how could he allow others to speak badly of Ling Han? Everyone experienced a great shock. Instantly, Ling Han's image was heightened endlessly. Someone who could nurture a seed-level disciple. How amazing was that? Fight me! Ding Ping shouted loudly. His fury soared high, and there were multiple flashes of divine light exuding from all over his body. He was much, much stronger than when he usually was. Ling Han was surprised. This disciple of his was really extraordinary. Could it be that with his fury, he was about to have an explosive burst of energy? Or could it be that he had awakened some ancient battle prowess, so he could push his battle prowess to a new height? Fu Liangye humphed coldly, and declared, I am in the medium extreme, and I can't be bothered to bully you. Firstly, he was not sure that he could defeat Ding Ping, and secondly, his arm was still injured, so his battle prowess was far from his prime condition, so he was naturally afraid to do battle. In case he lost, and lost to an opponent in a lower cultivation level, what face would he have left? Ding Ping still wanted to challenge him further when he saw the Rain Emperor leap out. The latter pressed a hand on his shoulder and shook his head at him. Ding Ping could only give up his idea. He was his second uncle, and with the absence of his master, he naturally had to obey the words of his second uncle. I, too, am in the medium extreme, so if I battle you, it would not be considered bullying you, right? The Rain Emperor asked in a deep voice. Fuck asterisk asterisk. Fu Liangye felt baffled. Didn't he just speak a few bad words about a person that no one had seen before? Actually, it couldn't even be considered bad words. Wasn't that just stating the facts as they were? Why was it that it seemed like he had punched a hole into the sky, with endless troubles following on his heels? All of them wanted to challenge him. And what relation do you have with that Ling Han? He asked. He was even more cautious with the Rain Emperor. He had witnessed the latter's abilities, and even Wu Zhe was forced into a continuous retreat after he suppressed his cultivation level, and even was not capable of fighting back at one point. Fighting with Ding Ping, he still had a chance of winning, but if he battled with the Rain Emperor, he did not even have the slightest confidence he could win. The Rain Emperor brandished his fist, and replied, Ling Han is my fourth brother. Pu. Everyone was once again shocked. The disciple was a seed, the brother was also a seed. Your whole family had to be monsters, right? That was a little too strong, wasn't it? Come fight me, the Rain Emperor called out severely. Fu Liangye's expression changed drastically, but no matter how confident he was in himself, he did not dare battle with the Rain Emperor, what more when he was currently still injured. However, he was the kind that could go with the flow, and immediately said, I have not chosen my words well, and was rude and impetuous. So he had yielded. Making a seed-level genius yield and apologize in public was a humiliation, but compared to being defeated in public, this was definitely much better. Hence, Fu Liangye had still made a wise decision. Only then did the Rain Emperor nod and return to his initial position where he sat back down. How domineering. As everyone watched, they could not help but develop an impression of the Rain Emperor. Though this man's cultivation level and abilities were not at the pinnacle, that domineering air was truly intimidating. There were definitely not many that could match him in this place. Wu Zhe's expression looked slightly ugly. At first, he had already taken control of the atmosphere, and everything had been centered on him. He'd been the only focal point, but now? His spotlight had been snatched away by a person that had not even been seen before. Senior brother disciple Wu, you have fought so many rounds, so you should take some rest, and let me have the stage. A young man in white jumped out, wearing a dazzling smile on his face. Junior brother Zhong. Wu Zhe's gaze jumped to him, and a sliver of caution appeared in his eyes. This person's name was Zhong Long. In the past, he had been equally famous as he. Their battle prowess was equally matched, but 100 years ago, Wu Zhe took a crucial step and formed his fifth mountain river. Zhong Long, however, had not succeeded even until now, and the gap between the two of them was rapidly enlarged. But Wu Zhe did not take this Zhong Long lightly, because the latter's talent was really no worse than his own. It could only be said that he was not as fortunate, and that was why he had kept failing. But, who knew when Zhong Long would advance into the pinnacle level, and become capable of being on equal footing with him? Wu Zhe thought for a moment, and stepped back with a nod, letting him have the stage. Ho ho, then I shall let junior brother Zhong have it. He had already exhibited enough of his power, and there was no need for him to continue showing off. Too far was as bad as not enough. Zhong Long's eyes swept over the masses. His eyes were obviously very gentle, but anyone who became the target of his gaze felt coldness rise up from the bottom of their heart as if they were being targeted by a venomous snake. Involuntarily, they lowered their heads, and dared not look him in the eye. He was an elite, and even if he hadn't formed his fifth mountain river, he was more or less as powerful. He had powerful abilities that could crush all his peers. Finally, his eyes stopped on Ling Han. "Junior brother disciple, how about we spar?" he asked, issuing his own challenge. Everyone was surprised. Zhonglong actually wanted to challenge Ling Han? It should be known that Zhonglong had not entered into the Majestic Heavens sect just over a year ago, but had been in the sect since 900 years ago. In such a great sect, he had been trained for 900 years. Even if he had not formed his fifth mountain river, his power would definitely surpass that of any ordinary cultivator in the peak stage of the mountain river tier. Gan Shiyun smirked icily. She had sacrificed a high-grade godly metal in exchange for Zhonglong's undertaking of this task. She wanted to teach Ling Han a harsh lesson, and cause him to be humiliated publicly. Chapter 1153 Let you have the first three moves. Chapter 1153 Let you have the first three moves. "Junior brother Han, do you dare battle me?" Zhonglong asked calmly. He had indeed received a piece of high-grade godly metal from Gan Shiyun, but this was not the reason that he was willing to move. He was willing to move because he enjoyed trampling over the pride of geniuses, and the more of a genius they were, the happier he was. Ling Han stood up and said, "Since you are asking to be defeated, I will naturally oblige." How boastful this guy was. They hadn't even battled yet, and he already thought that he would win. Wasn't he afraid that he would be smacked in the face by reality if he went too far and was too confident in his words? Zhonglong's expression darkened, and said, "I entered the sect 900 years before you did, so you should respectfully address me as senior brother." Who is the senior brother, and who is the junior brother? Shouldn't it be decided by abilities? Ling Han asked calmly. "If I advance into the Sun-Moon tier someday, junior brother Zhong would still have to address me as my lord." Fuck, his self-confidence was really full to burst. Everyone shook their heads. Though Ling Han was indeed very strong, having defeated Gan Shiyun before even entering the sect, Gan Shiyun had only entered the sect for over a year, after all. Hence, her abilities would be limited. Zhonglong, however, was completely different. He had already been in the sect for 9 centuries, and had been taught many secret techniques of the sect. Though he had not formed his fifth mountain river, he definitely had to have cultivated mountain river tier to perfection. Below the fifth mountain river, he should be invincible. Haha. Zhonglong laughed coldly. "You are very arrogant, but I like opponents like you, for I can trample all over you. You would become cut and bruised all over, and be thoroughly discredited. Could it be that you don't worry that you might be the one who would be stomped into the ground, and be so ashamed that you would not be able to show your face?" Ling Han shook his head. "This joke is not the slightest bit amusing." Zhonglong humphed. "I was not joking." Ling Han strove to be contrary. Zhonglong's expression became colder and colder. With a wave of his hand, he declared, "Then come fight. On the basis that you entered the sect earlier than I will let you have the first three moves." Ling Han placed his arms behind his back. Arrogance. Zhonglong was furious, and suddenly charged at Ling Han in attack. Boom. Though he had not formed his fifth mountain river tier, he had polished his cultivation in mountain river tier to the pinnacle. His origin power was incredibly dense, and as he attacked, it was as if the sky itself was pressing down, having the forceful and invincible bearing of mountain river tier. Ling Han's feet moved, and he calmly retreated, dodging his opponent's attack by a hair's breadth. Boom. 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 The three moves were delivered, and Ling Han had indeed dispersed all the attacks without even fighting back. Gasp. Everyone was stunned. This was slightly strong. Previously, Zhonglong's abilities had already been analyzed. Aside from the 6 king tiers, who else could confidently say they could let Zhonglong have the first three moves here? But Ling Han did not only say these words, he also did as he said. This man's abilities were deep and unmeasurable. Even Wu Zhe and He Dao looked slightly surprised. They had not thought that Ling Han would be so powerful. I have already let you have the first 3 moves, so I might as well handicap myself by using only one arm as well. Ling Han continued to place his right arm behind his back, and merely waved his left arm. This. Aren't you looking down on your opponent too much? That was Zhonglong. Gan Shiyun was shocked, but also pleased internally at the same time. This time, Ling Han had really offended Zhonglong to the fullest. Now, even without her saying so, Zhonglong would definitely be more than pleased to get rid of Ling Han. Good, very good. She did not believe that with Zhonglong's abilities, he would still be unable to defeat Ling Han. If that was so, the seed-level genius he was and the 900 years of cultivation he had after entering the sect would have been a complete waste of time. Zhonglong seethed in anger. He was truly angered now. Letting his opponent have the first 3 moves, handicapping oneself by using just one arm. These should have been his lines. But now, he was treated in this manner by a junior. This caused him to feel greatly humiliated. Junior brother, you've asked for this. His eyes were sinister and cold. All of a sudden, a blood-red flash appeared. His skin instantly became blood-red, and his body suddenly swelled. Pa! The fabric on his arms was immediately torn forcefully, revealing 2 furry clawed paws. That was right. They were not arms, but rather tiger-like legs with claws. His 2 arms had currently turned into clawed tiger paws, and there were close to 70 divine patterns flickering on them, exuding a blood-red halo. Hiss, what kind of secret technique is this? Why do I feel like Zhonglong's abilities had surpassed the level of the mountain river tier? Someone exclaimed in surprise. He was obviously a seed-level genius, yet had already turned pale from the aura that Zhonglong was exuding now. No, it hasn't surpassed the mountain river tier. The reason why you feel this way is because your cultivation level is still a bit too low. This is a strange technique that senior brother Zhong has cultivated. It is called Absolute Great Blood Tiger Technique. The moment he uses it, his power and speed would be increased greatly. Senior brother Zhong has already cultivated the mountain river tier to the peak stage in the first place, so his power could surpass 6 stars. And now, added with the Absolute Great Blood Tiger Technique, it is very possible his power could leap into 7 stars. That would be the power of the pinnacle level. Some senior brothers who had entered the sect earlier explained Zhonglong's current condition. He had not formed his 5th mountain river tier, yet he had broken through the pinnacle of the 4 minor levels of mountain river tier with other means. However, secret techniques would still have a limited duration, unlike truly forming 5 mountain rivers, which would be a permanent increase in power. Furthermore, did forming 5 mountain rivers mean that he wouldn't be able to cultivate a secret technique? Zhonglong shouted fiercely, and brandished his clawed hand in an attack at Ling Han. Xiu! He was too fast. He seemed to have transformed into a bloody flash, so fast that the majority of the cultivators in the consummate level of mountain river tier could not even catch his movement. Peng! They saw Ling Han move. His right hand flicked, and delivered a flash of sword chi. This strike was so fast it had reached the peak. Hong! Their attacks clashed, forming a brilliant explosion, and causing the majority of people to become blind even when they had their eyes open. They were completely unable to see how the battle had progressed. However, the brightness soon vanished. They saw that Ling Han was still standing proudly in the center of the arena, his right arm leveled out. His forefinger and middle finger had joined together to form a sword. There was a weak sword light flickering around it. Zhonglong, though, had collapsed at Ling Han's feet, his face facing upwards. There was blood gushing out of his chest. What? Someone as strong as Zhonglong had been defeated with a single move? Everyone watched with wide eyes, even their breathing had stagnated. How could that be possible? This was completely impossible. Some of them even wanted to shout in astonishment as they held their heads. They felt that they must have seen it wrong, and understood things wrong. It must have been Zhonglong who had defeated Ling Han with a single move. However, when they closed and opened their eyes again, there was still not the slightest change in the scene. Zhonglong was lying on the ground, completely unconscious. Defeat, utter and complete defeat. Ling Han sent Zhonglong back to the rock he had originally been on with a kick. The force he had used in this kick was ingenious. It just sent Zhonglong to lie face down on the rock, his behind facing upwards as his arms hung on either side. That image would definitely remain in everyone's memories forever. Gan Shiyun only felt coldness rise from deep within. Ling Han's strength had completely exceeded her expectations. He had defeated even Zhonglong so easily. Could it be that he had formed his fifth mountain river? That was really a moat to the heavens. Even a super sect the likes of the majestic Heaven sect, which had gathered the most brilliant geniuses from over 100 planets, still merely had 6 king tiers at present. This kind of genius would definitely be treated like a great treasure by the sect. How could she possibly have any hope for vengeance, then? Ling Han looked coldly at her. The fact that Zhonglong chose to challenge him alone was obviously not unrelated to Gan Shiyun. Gan Shiyun merely felt as if her soul itself trembled. She hurriedly lowered her gaze, not daring to meet Ling Han's eyes. Ho, I really did not imagine that junior brother Han would be so strong, Wu Zhe praised, smiling as he clapped his hands, a strong glint of wariness in his eyes. He did not dare to underestimate even Zhonglong, because it was highly possible that the latter would form the fifth mountain river, and once again catch up to him. Then, wasn't this man that had defeated Zhonglong even more frightening? Ling Han broke into a smile, and asked, Brother Wu, could you give me some guidance? Chapter 1154, Junior Brother Wu. Chapter 1154, Junior Brother Wu. Though Brother Wu and Senior Brother Wu were different by only one word, the meaning each address represented was completely different. Senior Brother Wu was a kind of respectful address from one who admitted his own abilities were no match for his. As for Brother Wu, that was a polite address from one who absolutely did not think he was weaker than him. It was just like He Dao and Wu Zhe, who would address each other as brother, and neither would address the other as senior brother. As for those who referred to themselves as senior brother, that was because they thought that they were stronger, so how could they possibly lower their own standing? But that was He Dao and Wu Zhe, 2 of the 6 king tiers. Was he, Ling Han, qualified to do the same? Wu Zhe's face involuntarily darkened, and a hint of displeasure appeared on it. Did this brat think that he could challenge him just because he had defeated Zhonglong? He was wary of Zhonglong, but that was not because of his present abilities, but rather his potential. In future, the latter might possibly be on equal grounds with himself. If it was in terms of abilities, he was naturally capable of crushing Zhonglong. Forming the fifth mountain river was a qualitative boost. Meanwhile, He Dao smiled slightly. He was still using divine flames to boil tea, appearing to be very serene. Junior Brother Han, you seem to be a little too arrogant, Wu Zhe said icily. Junior Brother Wu, I think that you had better address me as senior brother. That way, even if you lost, it would be logical, Ling Han countered with a smile. Pu. The others were gaping with their mouths wide open. They had already known that Ling Han was very arrogant, but had never thought that he would be so direct. All of them were seeds of the majestic Heaven sect, so why did he have to go so far with his actions? If he lost this battle, then would he still be able to stay in the sect? Who would dare befriend him after he became the target of Wu Zhe, one of the 6 king tiers? Would Ling Han be able to win? Besides diehard fans like Hu Feiyun, practically no one would believe that Ling Han would be able to win over Wu Zhe. Even if Ling Han had just beaten Zhonglong, Wu Zhe had defeated Su Jing, Duan, and such extreme geniuses. Furthermore, as one of the 6 king tiers, this glory was enough to fill others with absolute belief in him. In the sect, no one could challenge the position of the 6 king tiers. Nobody understood. Why did Ling Han seem to have a grudge against Wu Zhe to actually oppose him in this manner? They had indeed not guessed wrongly. Ling Han was a man who was too protective of his own. Wu Zhe had previously played a trick on the Rain Emperor, so how could Ling Han pretend like he had not seen it? He was naturally going to avenge this loss. Junior Brother Han, you are really quite interesting. Wu Zhe's whole face was livid. He stretched out his right hand, and Wang, it immediately turned pure gold in color like it was forged from divine metal. There was a vague feeling of transparency to it. The last few times he had fought, he had been very casual, but now, he had already used a powerful move even though the battle had not begun. It was naturally because he was truly angered. Of course, the other reason was that Ling Han was strong enough as he had defeated Zhonglong with a single move. Even Wu Zhe would not dare be careless with power like Ling Han's. Ling Han similarly did not dare underestimate this opponent. The trick he'd played on the Rain Emperor was one matter, but Wu Zhe's abilities could not be refuted just on the basis of that. Ling Han's physique was enough to make him invincible, but he did not want to use that kind of method to defeat his opponent. He was trying to get justice for the Rain Emperor, so he naturally had to obtain a satisfying victory. Junior brother Wu is not the slightest bit interesting, though, not calling me senior brother nicely. What are you being so stubborn for? Ling Han said, smiling. Have you had enough? Wu Zhe roared angrily. Wang, this shout turned solid, creating a visible sound wave. They could see a golden ripple roll out in all directions. Peng, 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 peng. At least half of the spectators fell off their rocks. The might of one shout was actually that powerful. Everyone was astonished. Wu Zhe probably hadn't shown even 30% of his true abilities so far. Oh no, how was Ling Han going to block it? Ling Han stood proudly, and as the sound wave swept over him, it only caused his robes to flutter and his hair to wave slightly. How could it have possibly hurt him? He calmly said, it is not decided by who has the louder voice. No matter how loud you shout, junior brother would still be junior brother, and it cannot be changed. You. Wu Zhe had almost gone mad in rage. He pounced out. In the end, he could not stop himself from taking the initiative to attack Ling Han. Theoretically, the senior brother would have to make an allowance of 1 or 2 moves in this kind of spar, and this was also why he had not made his move just now when he had obviously been in a thunderous rage. That was because he wanted to conduct himself with dignity as per his status, but now, he had been so angered by Ling Han that he had forgotten all that. He only wanted to trample all over this despicable guy. However, he was truly powerful, incredibly powerful, even. Cultivating the 5th mountain river was the pinnacle level. Innumerable rays of golden light descended from the skies, forming multiple sharp blades that slashed down on Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out his right hand, and formed a barrier above his head. A frightening amount of origin power boiled, exuding an aura that was not the slightest bit weaker than Wu Zhe's. Peng, 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 peng. The golden blades fell, but not one was able to penetrate Ling Han's barrier of origin power. And at this moment, Wu Zhe himself had also already arrived. His punch landed like a great star falling down, causing the heaven and earth themselves to pale in comparison. Ling Han's competitive spirit burned, and he similarly raised a fist to receive the others with an attack of his own. Peng! The 2 fists collided, and instantly, a brilliant, blinding light was created. A shock wave rippled out. Those who had just sat back down were once again sent flying. This time was even worse as they fell off the mountain peak. Thankfully, the mountain peak was not tall. Hence, they merely fell a short distance before reaching the ground. The collision of fists of Wu Zhe and Ling Han had not ended. The 2 sides were exerting power, wanting to cause the other to collapse. Zizizi, endless power appeared in the form of light, continuously asterisk, and the deafening noise was like a heavenly tribulation, and also like the heavens collapsing. Peng! Finally, the 2 of them trembled, and ended this clash of fists. Wu Zhe was bounced back, and landed safely with a somersault, whereas Ling Han retreated slightly for 7 steps before regaining his balance. Who got the upper hand? They couldn't really understand what they were seeing. It seemed to have been a draw. Ling Han frowned slightly. He had just broken through to the pinnacle level, after all. In terms of mere power, the other was just that slight bit superior to him, but the gap was not too large. Then, in a situation where the power of both sides was about the same, it would have to depend on who had the stronger secret technique, and whose natural talent in battle was higher. Wu Zhe's expression instantly became incredibly serious, and he said, "No wonder you were so arrogant, so it turns out that junior brother Han has also cultivated to the pinnacle level." What? Everyone felt their hair rise on ends. This aggressive guy had actually also formed the fifth mountain river. No wonder he had been able to challenge Wu Zhe. The two of them had already stood on the true peak of mountain river tier. Then, let us battle with our fullest. Wu Zhe shouted loudly, stretching out both arms. They were actually stretching continuously, becoming thinner, and turned into two golden blades. The blades were covered with divine patterns all over, and if one counted, there were as many as 79 of them. He gave a large shout, and charged over at Ling Han. His two-blade arms were brandished continuously, shooting out terrifying flashes of sword chi. Ling Han did not take it lying down. Using his two fingers like he would a sword, he ran forwards to receive the attack. Ding, 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 ding. They clashed endlessly. They were obviously mere bodies of blood and flesh, yet in their clash, the sounds of metals colliding with one another was heard, causing others to gasp. To what freakish extent had these two people cultivated their physique? But none would be as apprehensive as Wu Zhe. Chapter 1155 Unleashing Trump Cards. Chapter 1155 Unleashing Trump Cards. Wu Zhe was naturally aware that he could only transform his arm into a divine sword because of the cultivate that he practiced. However, he couldn't channel this cultivation technique forever. If he channeled it for too long, his body would be irreparably damaged. Meanwhile, it didn't seem like Ling Han was channeling any cultivation technique at all. It was as if his physique was innately as powerful as godly metal. This is far too terrifying. Do such freaks really exist in the world? He took a deep breath. The might of his opponent was a bit beyond his expectations. He waved his arm sword, and roared, "Heavens above and netherworld beneath, slay all the countless heroes in the world." Boom! Sword light burst from his body, and his aura instantly soared to a new height. "I am the sword." He launched a flurry of attacks at Ling Han, each of his strikes bold and powerful. He wished to defeat Ling Han with his supreme sword intent. Ling Han met Wu Zhe's attacks with his finger. Since his opponent wasn't using a god tool, he wouldn't use his divine demon sword, either. He was going to overwhelm his opponent in every single aspect and leave him with no room for excuses. Suppress him. Ling Han unleashed his divine patterns of gravity to affect his Wu Zhe's movements. They were at the same cultivation level right now, so Wu Zhe couldn't avoid the fate of being affected. The only difference was how much he was affected. He staggered forward before immediately regaining his balance and continuing his attack on Ling Han. Ling Han chuckled, and continued to unleash his divine patterns of gravity as he blocked Wu Zhe's attacks with his finger. Although his divine patterns of gravity only had minimal effects, even the smallest of effects were of great significance in a battle between elites. Indeed, Wu Zhe was extremely annoyed by the divine patterns of gravity. Although they had little effect on him, they would cause his attacks to veer slightly off course every single time. This ticked him off immensely. During battle, one's mental state was especially important. However, Wu Zhe's battle prowess was elevated to a new height after he unleashed one of his most powerful techniques, and it seemed as if he were about to turn the tables on and suppress Ling Han. Ling Han's pride was also like a raging fire, and he used his fingers like a sword as he activated his divine patterns of flame. Roaring flames instantly burst to life on his right hand. These weren't ordinary flames, but rather flames that had been formed from the regulations of the Great Tao. These were flames that could incinerate even godly metal. Wu Zhe frowned deeply. Even he felt pressure in front of these divine flame. His opponent looked much younger than him, so how could he engrave so many regulations of the Great Tao in his body? He couldn't lose. Wu Zhe's fighting spirit soared into the sky. He was one of the 6 Kings tier prodigies, so how could he lose to others? Being defeated by the other 5 King tiers was not an option, either. After all, if he lost, how could he still maintain an equal status with the other King tiers? Duo. He roared in a low voice, and the sound waves of his roar transformed into a sword that slashed toward Ling Han 1. Ling Han casually swung a fist at this sword. Pa! The sound wave sword exploded into pieces. However, a sharp pain instantly stabbed at his mind. Spiritual attack. Ling Han couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Who would have thought that the sound wave attack was only a facade? The true attack had actually turned out to be a spiritual attack. However, his opponent would never guess that he had already cultivated his divine sense to an extremely powerful level. It had been tempered by the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, so, like his physique, it was one minor level stronger than his current cultivation level. What? A look of shock finally appeared on Wu Zhi's face when he saw that his spiritual attack had been ineffective. He had unleashed the perishing shockwave just then, which was an extremely profound spiritual attack technique. In fact, it was one of the majestic Heaven Sect's secret techniques. He had only been taught this technique because he had reached the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. If one didn't reach the pinnacle level, this technique wouldn't be taught to them, regardless of how prodigious they were. Ling Han had only just entered the sect, so of course he hadn't been taught the perishing shockwave yet. Anyhow, even if he had learned it, it would only elevate the offensive ability of his divine sense, not the defensive ability. Wu Zhi had roared to cover up his spiritual attack, and his opponent had taken the full brunt of this attack. However, he had come out of it completely unscathed. This was unbelievable. What kind of freak is he? Ling Han cracked a grin, and said, "That was a fairly good surprise attack. I'll give you 9 out of 10. I've deducted 1 point to prevent you from becoming too arrogant." Fuck. Do you really think you're my senior brother? Wu Zhi's expression became icy, and he finally retrieved a god tool. It was a slightly damaged sword. However, it was radiating an ancient and profound aura. 3 clouds 3 flower sword, he said solemnly. 3 clouds 3 flower sword, someone shouted in astonishment. That's an inherited precious treasure of the Wu clan. According to rumors, this is a sword that was used by the ancient ancestor of the Wu clan. Both he and his sword perished during his final battle, yet the precious sword absorbed the ancient ancestor's soul. As such, one can comprehend the sword intent of the Wu clan's ancient ancestor if they cultivate with this sword. At that time, the Wu clan's ancient ancestor was a supreme elite at the heavenly body tier. According to legends, he was a freakish talent who could even exchange a few blows with eternal river tier elite. No wonder senior brother Wu's sword intent is so powerful. It's because he received the inheritance of the 3 clouds 3 flower sword. This wasn't a replica, and it was the genuine 3 clouds 3 flower sword. You should be proud that you forced me to use the 3 clouds 3 flower sword, Wu Zhi said. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Regardless of what you do, you still won't be able to avoid defeat. It's not a good habit to make such bold claims. Be careful of slapping your own face." Wu Zhi leaped forward, slashing with his sword as he did so. Countless clouds and flowers materialized in the air. Ling Han felt as if he had been drawn into another world, one that was brimming with clouds and flowers. However, if he moved even just a little bit, these clouds and flowers would exude a terrifying and wicked killing intent. Every step was thorny, and every step was dangerous. However, Ling Han was unafraid. Even if this genuinely was a high-grade god tool, how powerful it was would still depend on who was wielding it. Although Wu Zhi had formed 5 mountains and rivers, it was clear that he still hadn't reached the true pinnacle yet. Thus, it was impossible for him to possess power at the Sun-Moon tiers level. Meanwhile, Ling Han's physique determined that he would definitely have the last laugh. The only question was whether he won easily or won with some difficulty. He moved his right hand and retrieved the divine demon sword. A murderous aura instantly soared into the sky. This was devouring metal, a metal that could evolve into divine metal in the future. Even though its current level was still low, it possessed immense potential. Moreover, it had been tempered by several heavenly tribulations, and thus it was engraved with Ling Han's comprehension of Tao. One was engraved with its wielder's Tao, while the other was a damaged weapon used by someone tens of thousands of years ago. How could their affinity with their owner be the same? A brilliant light instantly burst from the divine demon sword, appearing tremendously mighty and astounding. The Rain Emperor and Ding Ping immediately sprang up, a look of excitement on their faces. They naturally guessed Ling Han's identity upon seeing him retrieve the divine demon sword. They also understood why he had stepped forward to challenge Wu Zhe. This was because Wu Zhe had wounded the Rain Emperor, and his tactics had more so been sly and shady. With Ling Han's personality of protecting his own people, how could he let such a matter slide? Their swords clanged together, and their martial intent collided violently. Strands of divine patterns materialized in the air and transformed into chains of regulations that fluttered in the sky. If the Three Clouds Three Flower Sword were in its original condition, Ling Han's divine demon sword would have been no match for it. After all, it was still just a seedling that was far from fulfilling its potential of becoming divine metal. However, the Three Clouds Three Flower Sword was damaged, and it would have been a block of useless metal had it not fused together with the soul of the Wu clan's ancient ancestor. Now, however, it was evenly matched with the divine demon sword. Chapter 1156, Suppressed in All Aspects. Chapter 1156, Suppressed in All Aspects. Ling Han nodded in his mind. The inherent high quality of the divine demon sword was finally displaying its might. It was a god tool that had the potential to become divine metal, after all, so how could it not be powerful? Ling Han didn't need to control his sword at all, as it was already fully engraved with his martial intent. He could manipulate it with just a thought, and doing so would be no different from wielding it with his hands. This was a terrifying notion. This sword was equivalent to a separate body of Ling Han, so when it teamed up with him, just how overwhelming would his battle prowess become? Wu Zhe instantly regretted summoning his god tool. Neither of them had summoned their god tool just then, and he hadn't been at a disadvantage, either. It was just that he didn't have an opportunity to attain victory yet. However, it was because of his strong desire to achieve victory that he summoned his Three Clouds Three Flower Sword. He wanted to end the battle as soon as possible, and thus reaffirm his dignity as a senior brother. However, who would have imagined that his opponent's god tool would be just as powerful as his? Moreover, it had an incredible affinity with Ling Han. It was as if it had been nurtured by him. This made him feel very miserable. This was really a case of going out for wool and coming back. Shornher had screwed himself over. Ling Han's heart and spirit were both linked to the divine demon sword, and thus the divine demon sword was able to channel his sword Dao as it slashed toward Wu Zhe. Meanwhile, Ling Han also swung his fists at Wu Zhe. This was the second path that he wanted to take. The sword Dao was his first choice. In any case, it would be a waste not to take the path of the sword Dao since he already owned a god tool like the divine demon sword. However, he also wanted to take the path of the unarmed combat Dao. He had cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and his physique was so powerful that he could be viewed as a human weapon. He possessed the Nine Dragons Tyrant body art on top of that, and this technique allowed him to wield an endless power. Thus, he was extremely suited to close combat. His fists, legs, elbows, and even head could all be used as deadly weapons. Boundless divine light radiated from the divine demon sword, and Ling Han's fists were also raging with divine flames as they rained down on his opponent. Similar to the Rain Emperor, he was exuding an incredibly mighty and domineering aura. He would crush whoever stood in his way. Wu Zhe was unwilling to yield. He felt that Ling Han was far too overconfident. Generally speaking, people would only attack in such a manner if their power was far greater than that of their opponent. If one swung their fists wildly as Ling Han did, they would suffer greatly if they came across an opponent who was slightly more powerful. Wu Zhe roared in anger as he used his sword to parry the divine demon sword. At the same time, his left hand also balled into a fist, and he punched at Ling Han. As one of the 6 king tiers, he wasn't afraid of anyone at the same cultivation level. Peng! 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 The two of them continued to exchange blows. In terms of power, neither of them had an advantage over the other. Although Wu Zhe was slightly more powerful, it was only by a very insignificant margin. Thus, this could still be viewed as an evenly matched battle. Their fists rained down on each other at incredible speed, and they had already exchanged 100 or so blows in just a few seconds. In the end, they separated from each other and concluded their brief moment of unarmed combat. Ling Han was naturally unscathed. However, blood was dripping from Wu Zhe's wounded left hand. In fact, his entire left arm was trembling in exertion. Even origin power shields wouldn't be of much use during such close-quarters combat. This was also why many cultivators avoided close-quarters combat whenever possible. Unarmed combat would reduce the effectiveness of origin power, though origin power was what most people cultivated. Very few people practiced body arts. In terms of physique, it was clear that Ling Han had achieved a resounding victory. Wu Zhi grimaced in disbelief. His opponent's divine sense was already frighteningly stable. Yet, right now, he realized that his opponent's physique was also on a freakish level. How can someone be so freakish? The spectators were all stunned. Wu Zhi had unleashed his full battle prowess, yet he had still been wounded. Who could have predicted this? Meanwhile, Gan Shiyun's slender body trembled in shock. She finally realized just how wrong she had been. She had provoked and offended an absolute freak. If Ling Han didn't die, his achievements would definitely surpass the ancients and amaze the contemporaries. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Junior brother Wu, are you still not going to admit defeat?" Wu Zhi's expression was livid, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Wasn't this utterly humiliating? He was one of the 6 kings, so who didn't give him some face? However, this person who had just entered the sect was acting aggressive and overbearing. Was this really a smart choice? "Hanlin, you've gone too far," Wu Zhi said through gritted teeth. Although he still had some trump cards, his mind went numb whenever he thought about his opponent's incredible physique. Could his trump cards really contain his opponent? In any case, this was only a sparring match, and some of his trump cards were consumables. They would be gone once he used them. Thus, he wasn't willing to use them, either. That being the case, he hoped that Ling Han would relent after a while and not take things too far. "Call me senior brother, and I'll naturally go easier on you," Ling Han said calmly. Wu Zhi had used shady tactics against the Rain Emperor, so how could Ling Han let him off the hook easily? There was a dark look in Wu Zhi's eyes, and his fists were also clenched tightly. He would never admit defeat. "You really think you can win?" He channeled a forbidden technique, and a strange pattern appeared on his forehead. It radiated with a dim and eerie glow. "What's that?" The spectators were all astonished and frightened. They had merely glanced at the pattern, yet it felt as if their minds had been slashed by a sword. This made them feel extremely uncomfortable. That's the extreme nightmare technique," someone shouted in astonishment. Heavens! Senior brother Wu actually mastered that ancient technique. Everyone hurriedly asked the person what this technique was. Only then did he reveal that this was one of the most profound cultivation techniques of the majestic heaven sect. However, it was incredibly difficult to cultivate, and there was no record of anyone being able to successfully master it. To their surprise, however, Wu Zhi was actually using this technique. Wu Zhi's aura changed noticeably, and a dark air rose from his body. It was as if he had transformed into Nightgaunt, one that would bring boundless nightmares to its victims. Ling Han was completely unfazed. Both his physique and his divine sense had broken through the limit of the mountain river tier, so what did he need to worry about? He stood in an undefeatable position, and the only unknown was the method by which he would achieve victory. Let's see what he's got. He was extremely interested in this cultivation technique as it caused a hint of fear to grip at his heart. "You'll regret this," Wu Zhi said coldly. He made a punching motion toward Ling Han, and countless streaks of dark light surged from his fist. He had suffered once already, so he didn't dare engage in unarmed combat with Ling Han again. Instead, he reverted to cultivator's traditional tactic. He increased his distance from the opponent to battle using martial arts techniques. Ling Han swung his fists in defense. Pu, pu, pu. The streaks of dark light struck his fist, and they surprisingly left several patches of blood marks. So powerful. Ling Han was astonished. One had to realize that the toughness of his physique was already on par with level 5 godly metal. In other words, it was equivalent to the full power defense of a cultivator at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Even so, Wu Zhi's attack had still left several blood marks on his fists. This was proof of just how terrifying the streaks of dark light were. Meanwhile, Wu Zhe almost fainted in shock. In reality, his cultivation level was too low for him to channel the extreme nightmare technique. He was indeed able to channel it now, yet this came at the price of him not being able to use origin power for an entire 3 months after this. He had paid such a heavy price, so the streaks of dark light that he had unleashed were naturally terrifying to the extreme. However, they merely left a few blood marks on Ling Han's fists. How could he accept this? He wanted to vomit a large mouthful of blood. It's fairly powerful, but it's still not enough. Ling Han laughed loudly as he manipulated his divine demon sword and launched a flurry of attacks that completely suppressed Wu Zhe. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.